You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
And we'll call this meeting of the Branford Planning Zoning Commission to order. It is Thursday, July 6, 2023. I have 7:03 p.m. I'll introduce members of the commission and staff. Commission member Joe Chadwick. Joe, are you here?
Joe Chadwick is present.
Thank you, Joe. Fred Russo. Fred, are you here? Fred, you're muted, it looks like.
Okay, Fred, you should be able to unmute yourself. Sorry about that. I thought I caught you.
How about now? Okay.
You're good.
We got you, Fred.
Fred Russo's present.
Thank you, Fred. Joe Vayuso. Joe, are you here?
Joe Vayuso's here.
Thank you, Joe. Marcy is not here, I guess. And Massimo Liguri. Massimo, are you here?
Massimo's here.
Thank you, Massimo. And Sharon Hutner. Sharon, are you here?
Sharon Hutner is here.
Thank you, Sharon. And I'm Chuck Anders, Chair. Our staff this evening is our town planner, Harry Smith. Harry, are you here?
I am here.
And our assistant planner, Evan Brining. Evan, are you here?
Here.
Thanks, Evan. And I'll ask our secretary to read the notice of public hearing. Fred?
Legal notice, Town of Branford. The Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Branford, Connecticut hereby gives notice of public hearings to be held on Thursday, July 6, 2023 at 7 p.m. by remote technology to consider the applications listed below. Information regarding how to participate in the public hearings will be provided on the Commission's meeting agenda that will be posted on the town's website at least 24 hours prior to the meeting. 1. Application number 23-6.1, special exception for grading, section 6.8, for a terrace located at 10 Tyler Avenue, Patricia Pearson, applicant and owner. Application number 23-5.2, special exception for an office retail use located at 107-109 Montague Street, P&D Holding Company, LLC, applicant and owner. At said hearings, all persons will have the right to be heard. Copies are on file in the Planning and Zoning Commission's office at the Planning and Zoning Department, 1019 Main Street, Branford, Connecticut, 06405. Written communications may be sent to the above address or to planning and zoning at branford-ct.gov. Branford Planning and Zoning Commission, C. Andres, chairperson.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Thank you, Fred. We'll follow our normal format for public hearings, which is the applicant will go first, make its presentation, including the applicant or its consultants. After that, we turn it over to the commission and town staff. We typically hear the summary of a staff report summarizing staff comments and concerns about the application. We open it up for questions from commission members. And after that, we open to the public portion. And I'm going to ask Evan to explain how to participate in this Zoom meeting. But what simply we'll do is we'll open up for the public. You'll identify yourself, say your name, and make your comments. After the public portion, the applicant is allowed to respond to the public portion, and there may be additional questions from commission members or staff. We may or may not continue or conclude the public hearing, depending on how it goes. It's certainly not unusual to continue public hearings over multiple meetings. And with that, I'm going to ask Evan to explain how to participate in the public hearing process.
Sure. So if you'd like to participate, ask any questions or make any comments during the public hearing. Once Chairman Andre indicates that it's time for the public to speak, you can, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a reactions button. You select that and you can further press raise hand. Please do that if you'd like to indicate you'd like to speak. You can also type into the chat that you'd like to comment, or just wave your hand in front of the camera and I'll try to catch you. If you're calling in by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand, and we ask that everybody please begin their comment or question by stating their name.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Thank you, Evan. With that, we'll move to our our public hearing agenda. Our first public hearing is Joseph Tomorrow, applicant owner 245, which is the lot formerly between 233 and 249 East Main Street. This is a special exception modification for a multi-unit residential building. We had opened that public hearing on May 18th. I believe they were waiting to get some comments from DEP about the movement of the location of a public access area. And my understanding is that the applicant is still waiting to get final comments from DEP. Is that correct, Harry?
Mr. Chairman, Harry Smith, Town Planner. Yes, that's correct. We have an email from Jim Preddy, the applicant's engineer, asking that the application be continued. This is a public hearing, which is opened on the 20th of April. Be further continued to the July 20th meeting, and the time extension for that purpose granted if needed. I did calculate the maximum statutorily allowed extension plus regular public hearing time, which is 100 days. So if you add that to the 20th of April, I come up with the 29th of July. So we can continue it to the next meeting on the 20th, but that is pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. So we'll continue this. And Harry, I'm just looking at the agenda. It looks like we received the application on the April 20th, but we opened the hearing on May.
Oh, you're correct. I had my paper over the wrong thing. So we have plenty of time then.
Okay. So anyway, we will continue this public hearing to our July 20th meeting. Again, that will be a Zoom meeting as well at 7 p.m. That brings us into item number 2, which is John and Jennifer Solo, applicants and owner for 117 Flax Mill Road. This is a special exception, 6.8 grading for a pool. Is the applicant prepared to present this application?
John Sulo. Oh, sorry, Gavin, go ahead.
No, I was going to introduce you. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. John Sulo, the owner of 117 Flax Mill Road. I know we were just granted a variance 2 weeks ago due to a hardship. My wife and I purchased the home in December, started the process right after the new year trying to get a pool done. We've gone through wetlands and had the approval done there and got the variance 2 weeks ago. So now we come before you looking to get it done.
Chuck and just share. Thank you, Mr. Sulo. Anything else or?
I think the application and stuff has it pretty well. It's a pretty unique situation just because we purchased the land and the owner did some modifications illegally. So we just, that's why we had to go through the variance process. So
you're trying to clean up what the prior owner left you, it sounds.
Yeah, we're trying to just clean up what the prior owner did and put a pool in. We'd also have limited space just because the wetlands, the acre of wetlands behind my home that we still own, and the septic and everything, trying to get it in there. So,
Chuck, I understand. Thank you, Mr. Sulo. Evan, you want to review the staff report for us?
Recording in progress.
So, like Mr. Sulo said, today they are simply applying for the installation of an in-ground pool. And they had to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals earlier this month because between the years of 2000 and 2015, the previous owner had continually filled his backyard wetlands to establish a flat rear yard for himself. This resulted in some grading that didn't meet our grading 3-to-1 ratio. You can see back here, this cross-hatched area on the site plan. That's the area of those grades that were installed without any permits. They went to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Like I said earlier, they were granted a variance for a grade at 2-to-1. They meet all the other bulk requirements of the R5 zoning district. They were required to install some plantings as a part of their Inland Wetland Commission approval. No lighting plan was included. However, I've added a condition that any proposed lighting or future lighting would have to be compliant with section 6.7 of our lighting regulations. They do include erosion control measures on their site plan. And based on the application materials presented, the applicant satisfies the special exception criteria. Staff recommends the following conditions. prior to the issuance of a zoning or building permit, erosion control measures shall be installed to the satisfaction of the zoning enforcement officer, and any lighting has to meet the requirements of section 6.7.
Chuck Anderson, Chair. Thank you, Evan. Any questions or comments from commission members before we open it up to the public? Hearing no comments, let's open it up to the public. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this application? And again, you may remember how Evan told you, gave instructions how to do that, but Evan, you want to just mention it again?
Yeah, sure. Down at the bottom of your screen, there's a reactions button. You can select that. It gives you a few options. You can, from there, press raise hand. You can also type into the chat that you'd like to speak. And if all else fails, you can wave your hand in front of the camera.
Okay, once again, any member of the public wish to comment?
I do not see anyone.
Okay. Okay, then, does any further comments by the applicant? Mr. Solo, any comments?
No, I think Evan kind of touched everything perfectly there for me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Solo. Any questions, comments from commission members or staff before we close this? Hearing none, then we'll close this matter as a public hearing. And again, this is something we will probably take up and after we complete our public hearings. So thank you, Mr. Solo.
Thank you.
Brings in item number 3, which is continuation of the landscaping zoning regulation amendment. It's Shirley McCarthy and Peter Henschel, a zoning regulation amendment to add definitions to section 2.2. .3, the landscape provision is subsection to section 6 regarding dependencies. And again, we opened this at our last meeting, and this was a continuation. I know there were, some legal questions, some other things brought up. Any further comments that you'd like to make at this time?
I would just like to say I went through Joe Chadwick's edits very carefully, and they were great. I mean, there were a lot of, rephrasing, rewording, or asking for definitions of things that we didn't define. And there's a couple of things that, I could clarify at a later date with him or you all, whatever, but I thought they were very helpful.
Chairman Andrus, this is Peter Henschel.
Mr. Henschel.
Just to follow up on what Shirley said, I agree that I've looked at Commissioner Chadwick's comments, and to the extent that they were actual proposed rewording, et cetera, I don't think that we have any problem with having those be incorporated into the wording of the proposal. One question would be whether that, at this point, if you're going to close the hearing, would be best done by the town planner, or whether you'd like us to participate in that process. There was one thing, though, that I was concerned about it in retrospect. I didn't pick this up when we were originally writing the regulation, but I think needs some discussion. And that was on the applicability section at the very beginning. I think the intent, and we talked about this in the last public hearing, the intent was that this would not apply, these regulations would not apply to single family residential projects. But in the wording of the applicability, it would apply, it says that it would apply to any development in Branford that requires site plan approval or special exception approval. And there are, going through the regulations, quite a list of special exceptions that I question whether we would want these to apply to, and specifically on the residential side, accessory structures. If somebody came in for a grading, special exception for grading, I don't think the intent is that we would therefore want that project to incorporate these landscape regulations. Or, for instance, if somebody came in for a height variance or a size variance on a accessory building in a residential for a single family residence, I don't think we would consider this to be applicable. So some look at the regulations where special exceptions are invoked and to try to figure out how we could exclude in the applicability those instances that clearly I don't think are really where we would want these regulations to apply. So that was one of my main concerns. But again, in terms of Commissioner Chadwick's comments, I think they were good, and it's just a matter of figuring out how to best incorporate them into the wording and get them back in front of the commission.
Chuck Candace, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Henschel. Yeah, yes, I agree with that. I think we had some discussion at the last hearing about that they wouldn't be applied to single family housing. I think by covering special exceptions, that can cover a lot of things that we require special exceptions in residential zones, like oversized, like accessory apartments, oversized garages, things like that, which isn't necessary, and also 6.8. So I think there is another section that did take them out, but maybe we should move that to the front, Harry, right? I mean, I know we had it, or we took parts of it out somewhere, but
yeah. Harry Smith, Town Planner. We did with respect to front yard landscaping, but I don't know if it's comprehensive enough in terms of its applicability, in terms of several other aspects of the landscaping regulations. So I think you both are right, really, to make sure that that's as clear as it needs to be, to exclude what should be, was intent. It now is intended to be excluded.
Sure. The other, I know there was the legal question was brought up concerning one of the sections. That was the section that required the substitution whenever trees are removed, significant trees are removed, that there has to be a planting of an equivalent somewhere. And I think that makes sense for developed sites and for partial development, but the concern and I think we raised some issue, and Harry raised the issue, but for an undeveloped site, there's going to be removal of a lot of, and I'm thinking in the industrial zone, we have some from Bittersweet, there's something going to come in, and there's substantial amount of undeveloped land in that area, in that part of town. So the concern I would have is, I mean, that would impose a fairly substantial burden. And I don't know if, I mean, there may not be space on the individual property to plant all the trees if you take down a lot. And I don't know if you can, if offsite is appropriate or fee in lieu of is allowed legally. And it seems, I'm not aware of if this is done anywhere else. It seems a bit of a stretch for that. But I mean, that said, don't get me wrong, that so many other things in there which are very good, and but that particular provision raised my eyebrows a bit. So I just mentioned that. Mr. Henschel.
Yes, Chairman. Just one comment on that. I agree that this for a site like something that might be developed in Bittersweet Farm area that could be substantial, the requirement to replace the trees. But on the other hand, I think this, in a way, this was the very intent of these regulations, was to make sure that as development happened in the town, we were not substantially reducing our tree cover, our native tree cover. So if there were any way that we could develop some sort of an alternative that would replant in other areas some substantial amount of trees where substantial amounts were removed, I'm sure that Shirley would agree that would be desirable. If that's something that in the end the commission feels is impractical or unfair, then so be it. But that was part of that was the intent of the regulations, to preserve as much of our tree cover and the benefits of it as possible.
Chuck and Sharon, thank you, Ms. Mitchell. I mean, that's helpful to know what the intent is when we look at this in our deliberations.
Can I add something?
Yeah. Sure, absolutely.
Oh, good. So as I explained last time, the health of a neighborhood is partly dependent on the tree cover, and neighborhoods that have a lot of trees have a lower mortality rates, and the opposite is when they don't have a lot of trees, they have a higher premature mortality rate. The American Forest Service has a tree equity map, and if you look at Branford, there are certain areas that kind of correlate with the environmental injustice zones, which typically have far less tree cover than other areas. Is there a way that we could create a fund that those areas of the town get priority for tree planting?
I mean, and then there's sort of two questions here. One is a legal question. Can we require a property owner to subsidize, not to subsidize tree planting off-site for this? In my, I think Harry sent an email to the town attorney about that. Is that legal? Is there authority to do that? I know that in some cases, there may be authority when the legislature does allow you to do like a fee in lieu of, for example. It says so explicitly. I don't know if I haven't heard of one, and I don't think that's in the statute now, but I don't know. That would be one thing. There's the legal question. Then there's the, I don't know, the fairness, practicality, legal expectation, the notion that person, they own property, they want to have a development that will, if it's undeveloped, there may be removing a whole lot of trees. There may not be space on the property to put the equivalent amount that you're taking down on other places on the property. It depends how much development is there. And is there, is that is that what we want to do? While, supporting the goal of planting trees everywhere. And frankly, buying land that has a lot of trees to preserve it as open space. I mean, there's a number of techniques that support the goal. But that's what I'm, giving you the benefit in case you want to address it. That's what's going through my head in case, what are thoughts that you may want to add to that. And I don't know if other commission members have thoughts or comments about that as well. But, they may want to pitch in. So I haven't.
Yeah, I just, Sharon Hutner here. I would support pursuing an investigation to find out the legality and just to make sure, because I think that, as Shirley said, if we could possibly improve the economic justice areas, we would be not only helping the environment, but the residents of Branford who live there. So I think it would be nice if we could somehow just investigate the legality and see what our options are.
Yeah, you would have to, I suppose, get permission of the property owner. Say we had a fund, and I guess you could go to people and say, hey, we think your area is under, unless it's town property or it's a land trust property or something. But if it's a private property, I suppose you could say, hey, we have these funds available for tree planting. You're willing to do it. So, but it's kind of interesting.
Well, these kinds of issues actually have been discussed at meetings of the tree commission. And so I think people are thinking about this kind of procedure and the best way to go about it. So it's not like it's a completely novel idea.
Certainly. And I'm certainly would love to hear from the town attorney about it. That's sort of that as well.
Absolutely.
Also, to the extent that we exchange money for subsidized housing, or an inability to provide subsidized housing, there is a precedent set for that kind of transaction.
Joe, Chuck Andrews here, and absolutely, and that's explicitly in the statutes. In other words, statutes explicitly say you can do that, and you can require open space as part of a subdivision. And the theory is, and you can require a fee in lieu of parking spaces, I think. But in each of those items, there's something in the statutes that say you can do it. And I don't know if there's anything that says, and the argument would be, you know, where they say so explicitly, they mean it. And if they don't say explicitly, you can't do it. That's the general theory. But we'll see what the town attorney says.
Chuck, Fred Russo.
Yeah, Fred.
I would like to say that I, in principle, agree with you that I think if we were to require a developer contractor to plant trees somewhere else, it really seems to me that we're stretching the regulations of landscaping. To me, landscaping is you have a lot, the property, the application comes before the commission, and we look what's there. And I think that we have enough expertise to say, hey, you can't cut all the trees down. Or you gotta, on the property, you can make those changes or those additions, but to include in the regulation that if you cut X number of trees down, you have to plant them somewhere else. To me, that seems like it's a very, very extreme measure for our board to do, because we're not only dealing with the landscape of the property that we're reviewing, but now we have to find a place to put more trees. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but as Joe said, it was something in lieu of. I just think that physical action of saying you got to plant trees somewhere else is not a good idea. I think it's easier said than done, actually. And I think in the big picture, when someone comes before us and they look at the regulations, they're gonna have a second thought and think whether or not this is either fair or it's legal or whatever. I just think that it's stretching what the landscaping regulations are. That's my feeling on it.
Chuck, I understand. Thank you, Joe. And I know, Peter, you want to comment. Let's see if there are other commission members. I know Marcy's not here this evening, but Joe Viuzzo, did you or Joe Chadwick have any comments?
On this particular thing, I've sort of said my piece. I've got one other thing I want to talk about when this is done.
Sure. Okay. Well, anything, Joe Viuzzo, do you have any particular comments on this thing? And then we'll move to other comments. And
Well, I'm a little hard to believe when we get to impervious surface. Put in a parking lot, lessening the property. So I mean, it's nice to replace trees wherever you could, but to replace all the trees that have been taken down, I think it's almost impossible. Some of these people don't have the extra property to put it somewhere else. But Fred said in regulations are pretty good. But experts to take into consideration some of these trees. Many as we could replace as many as we could wherever you could, but I think a little more common sense has to be.
Chuck and Sharon, thanks, Joe. Joe Chadwick, you had another comment?
Yeah, this was about 6.3C, number 6, regarding damage to any significant trees shall be reported to the commission immediately and repaired by a Connecticut licensed arborist after consultation with the commission. My issue with that is kind of a large one that involves some town cooperation, because once the commission makes its, we vote on something, it's pretty much out of our hands. If a deficiency is reported back to the commission, we can sternly wag our fingers at our Zoom cameras at a meeting. But there is the problem of the reporting, the duration, and having some reason for us to act, which I don't believe we have, or some authority to act. This seems to be something that the zoning enforcement officer needs to implement with reasonable dispatch and authority. To do that, it would be very helpful if the town had a pre-procured list of arborists and landscape architects that could be tapped on a rotating basis to consult with the CEO and come up with a solution, and that gets reported as a matter of record to the commission. I worry about the commission's overall impotence in acting, that we just can't. We just have no authority to do anything. You want to be able to act swiftly and certainly, and you want to be able to do it in a way that is lawfully compliant with procurement regulations, because we all know the first time someone does something in this town in an adverse manner, or at least something perceived as an adverse manner, there's going to be, somebody's on the take or some corruption kind of thing going on, and it just turns into a pile of red herrings. So if there was an existing pre-approved list of people that the CEO can acquire and help resolve the issue in a timely manner, it would sort of take the commission out of that cycle of us sort of having an opinion but not really being able to do anything about it. I sort of explained that in my comments, but since I did some of these comments quite late in the evening, I'm not sure how clear that might have been, but because this reaches into town procurement and stuff like that, Harry and staff might want to look into the feasibility of it, or the actual mechanism of getting that sort of set up. And if this is something that might link with something else or have a different characteristic. That's it.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Joe.
Harry Smith, Town Planner, can I just comment on maybe a couple of tangential issues to that? It might, assuming we're going to possibly charge a developer, though it gets a little tricky when that developer may not be in the application process. So we really couldn't do it through the fee schedule. I'm wondering how he would pay for a consultant, unless we have the budget through the town to do it. There may be a way to do it under ordinance, but that would bring up some issues, I think, more those lines than, we could certainly get a pre-vetted list. We've done that. We have, a list of, for example, with the peer review for the traffic studies we've done recently, we've gone to the list that's basically pre-vetted. We just went down the list, and the first consultant wasn't doing it, and we tried to get a couple if we could, but frankly we just got one that was available. But we could do that because we had done exactly what you suggested, which is go through, have a pre-vetted list. So we could certainly do that part of it. That's no problem. It's sort of figuring out the process of either getting the budgetary money in place or getting a way to have the property owner responsible for the damage to the tree to pay for it, a lien or whatever. I think that would be the trick to doing it. So, but some of this language actually is existing. I think it makes a lot of sense to put it at the staff level, frankly. But it has been at the commission level, even though the only hook has really been sign off on a CO or something like that. That's been the way we can, in the past have been able to say, or they come in and they basically get, retroactive approval to take down a significant tree that got damaged or destroyed. That's the other way it's been addressed.
Chuck Anderson here. Thanks, Jerry. Why don't we, any other comments from commission members? And then what we'll do is we'll allow the Ms. McCarthy and Mr. Henschel to have some further comments, and then we'll open up to the public. So hearing nothing else from commission members or staff, then Mr. Henschel and Ms. McCarthy, you have some additional comments.
Yes, this is Peter Henschel. Just to circle back on the tree replacement question, I think that, as some people have said, and I would agree, that it's probably impractical and in a way unfair to require a developer to actually find a location and replant, or in some other location, trees that were taken down for a substantial development. However, the idea of having that developer, when they took down a substantial number of significant trees, be required to pay into a fund that could be put, applied elsewhere in Branford separately makes a lot of sense to me. And in a way, if a developer, it's just like wetlands. If a developer is coming in and has a portion of land to be developed that is substantially treed, those trees are in fact a current resource to the town, even though they may be on private property. They do impact on the overall environment. So I think that to require at least payment into a fund to replace them, makes sense. It's a relatively easy thing to administer and get on with the project. And then whatever the other entity is that received those funds could take care of applying or developing a process for actually having trees planted in Branford, separate from the development.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Henschel. That's be interesting to see have the town attorney weigh in on this. Ms. McCarthy,
I'll just second what Peter said. This Forest Service expert at the University of British Columbia that studies urban trees and public health. It really is a public health issue. And he's pointed out with humans moving more to urban centers and less rural, and climate change impacting urban centers more, the trees are becoming more and more important. So I'll just add that. But I wanted to comment on Joe's comment. I like the idea of using the zoning enforcement officer, because in the past I've asked her to go look at a bunch of dead trees in that parking lot across from the car place on West Main, and she saw that as part of her job to say they're dead. But the town also has an arborist that they use, Cameron Pierce, who the Green Committee uses quite a bit, and he's extremely knowledgeable. So I think there are a number of options, so that I agree with you totally. It's really not the commission's job.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Ms. McCarthy. This one, let's see if there's any public comment. There's any Massimo, I forgot to did you have any comments? I'm sorry. I think I called on some people and I didn't specifically mention you, Massimo. Massimo.
That's okay. That's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I love the concept of keeping the trees and replacing trees. I just I was just wondering if anybody, kind of put some numbers together on, what the cost would be per tree, or does anybody kind of know that offhand? If someone could answer that for me. And it seems like it would be a very expensive process for the builders, for the developers. And although I would love to see as many trees as possible stay up, I would be concerned that it would deter or raise the prices of the homes being built in our town if we had to put that expense onto the builders, and then they would just take it and put it onto the purchaser to move into our towns. And I'm just wondering, basically, is that a big expense to replace each tree, or like how much more would a house cost if a developer would have to put that up and replace the trees, or pay a fee? And what would that fee go to? Is another, big thing. Is it going to go to putting up trees, or, because that's the reason why we're going to be, maybe possibly doing a fee in lieu, and hopefully it would go to putting up more plants and trees within our town in certain areas. So I guess, I'm just wondering what kind of expense it would be, per tree.
Thanks, Massimo. Mr. Henschel, you have your hand raised. Did you want to address that?
Yes, I was just, as a reminder, going to point out that this does not apply to single-family residential construction. So in terms of it actually increasing, the development of single-family homes and the prices of those homes, I don't think that it would be impactful. This would apply more to commercial development projects.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Henschel. So I think I said I'd open up to the public, and I see a hand raised. Evan, let's open up for the public. Evan, who do you got?
First up is Ivy Bigelow Kim. Sorry, I think I just muted you right as you unmuted. Sorry about that. Let's try it again.
I think she's unmuted herself there.
Now you're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, we were just at cross purposes. I'm Ivy Bigelow Kim. I'm a member of the Community Forestry Commission, and would like to speak in support, actually, of the idea of some kind of structure whereby there's a deterrent to removing trees, significant trees for builders, because that cost ends up being pushed onto the public in the end. The town currently plants street trees to offset the emissions that buildings create and to cool the town and to shade the areas where people walk. So to have the developers take on that cost, I think is not unreasonable. And I actually think there's a certain logic to the structure of having them plant a certain number of smaller replacement trees when they remove a significantly sized tree, because those smaller replacement trees add up to the services of a mature tree. So if we can deter them from taking down that mature tree, if they can move the driveway 3 feet to the left, or if they can not stack soil on top of the root zone of a significant tree and kill it off, if we can motivate that. I can't speak to the legal questions of whether or not we're allowed to do that, but I think that it's a pretty good way to deter them from doing that. I know there's some amount of practicality where if you're going to build on an entirely treed lot, some trees will need to be removed. And I like the idea of maybe putting that into a fund. As I said, the town currently plants trees in public spaces, so there's some amount of structure already there for that. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Evan, any other members of the public wish to comment you see?
Yes, looks like Perry Maresca.
Hi, my name is Perry Maresca. I'm Branford's Economic and Business Development Manager. While I wholeheartedly agree that we should protect our natural environment, I am concerned that this is somewhat overreaching. And as a potential of not just controlling development, but choking development with a somewhat unreasonable regulation. The old Bittersweet Farm property was brought up earlier this evening. This project, which caught extremely positive international attention immediately when it was announced, can be in jeopardy. The Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce and Rex Development have all expressed extreme excitement for this project and how important and beneficial it will be for the town. The Greater New Haven area, the state of Connecticut, and the Northeast region of the country as a whole. Representatives from Advanced CT and Connecticut's Department of Economic and Community Development and Governor Ned Lamont himself have all visited the site and all have voiced incredible support of this project. The developers have already pledged to not only respect the natural surroundings, but to enhance the inland wetlands and to create a park-like campus on the 125 plus acre site. They're looking to build 500,000 square feet of high-tech, biotech, life science property in this campus. I would respectfully request that the applicants have a sit down with members of the Economic Development Commission to discuss the problems that may arise if something as restricting as this were to become regulatory. Again, I agree we should protect our natural resources, and you have beautiful trees and you want to maintain them and whatever, but we just want to make sure that we don't come up with a reputation of regulation. So I'm more than happy to sit with Shirley McCarthy and Peter Henschel and any of the other members of the EDC or anyone else that came up with these regulations, because I do agree it is beneficial for the town and for everyone to do something like this. But I think we need to just look at some of the effects that could happen. The expenses that the developers would incur may deter them from even thinking about coming to Branford. We want to have a strong tax base. We want to keep our taxes low, and by proper, responsible development. And again, I'll say responsible because I do agree. We want to protect the wetlands. We want to protect the natural environments, but we can't just go automatically with here's what have to be done. So I do want a more open communication on that. I respectfully ask that the public hearing be continued until the applicants and representatives of the Economic Development Commission have a chance to discuss practical options. This would give a better opportunity to find a most fair, practical, beneficial policy to all involved. Again, in a manner that could be most beneficial to all the citizens and businesses of Branford. Thank you.
Chuck Anderson, thank you. Thank you. Here. Before we go back to the applicant, other members of the public wish to comment? Evan, do you see anyone?
Just one more time to reiterate, down at the bottom of your screen, there is a reactions button. From there, you can press raise hand to indicate that you'd like to speak, or type into the chat that you want to comment. I do not see anyone that would like to speak.
Okay, Ms. McCarthy, did you have some response?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Perry by saying on the front page of the highly respected business section of the New York Times, there's a big article on how major companies are going native and planting trees and wildflowers for biodiversity and saving tons of money due to cooling and not having to mow and water. Hewlett Packard, these are major companies that are kind of doing what we're trying to do. So there are people at the top that really get it on the importance of this for human health and biodiversity.
Thank you, Ms. McCarthy. Mr. Henschel? You're muted, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Peter Henschel. I was just a little unclear from the comments of Perry that whether or not he was voicing an objection to sort of the overall flow of the regulation proposed, or whether it was really focused on the idea of the replacement of the removal of significant and noteworthy trees as a subsection of this proposal. So it would help a little bit to have a clarification on, how extensive the concern was relative to the overall regulation proposal.
Chuck Anderson, thank you, Mr. Henschel. Mr. Maresca, I think the question is, I think the section replacement of significant trees is in one section. I think it's 6.3.E5. So it's just one subsection of a regulation. I mean, one thing we could do is, put that aside and continue with the rest or whatever, but or discuss it. But were there other comments, I guess, other parts of the regulations that were of a concern? So we'll allow Mr. Maresca to address that. Evan, you could allow him to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Andrus. Now, I think, and again, not a concern about, we have to replace trees and we have to do this and we have to do that. I just think that it probably would be in the best interest if before we went ahead and improved this, if the Economic Development Commission can have an opportunity to sit down and explain some of the concerns overall, even just the case of, regulations. So we need to market this a little better to not come across as, okay, we just did more regulations. We have the strictest lighting regulations around. And again, I don't fault them or disagree with them. I was, involved in something earlier with, early on with Branford and Mr. Creelan. And it was all part of getting people to be more aware of the problems with light pollution and with light trespass. We still have a lot of people, developers that we'll badmouth Branford because, again, it's a regulation, but we just need to make sure that this regulation is something that is explained and nurtured a little bit better. That's a little bit more business friendly as far as when they are advised that there's something else that they have to do. If you start talking about all these extreme costs that they have to go through, or at least they get the interpretation that it's an extreme cost, again, it's going to keep them from wanting to build. You've got properties that really need improvement that are blight properties. But if someone knew that they had to go and they had to do a lot more than they thought they were going to have to do just because of something that might be in this regulation, one line that turns them off, we've got an issue. So all I'm saying is I would really like to have the opportunity that we sit down and I think both Mr. Henschel and Ms. McCarthy, I think they know me well enough to know that it would be a very beneficial conversation for all. And I think it would come across a lot better when this came into effect, that they knew that there was that the townspeople and developers knew that, hey, this was a collaborative effort to make things best for everyone involved. That's all.
Chuck and Chair, thank you, Mr. Maresca. Okay, so I think we've heard from the public and the applicants, so we're at the point of, do we want to continue the public hearing? We've heard the request from our economic development director that he's made that request. There is, I guess, we haven't heard from the town attorney about the legality of the fee in lieu of issue. I don't know. I mean, my sense is that, when you have a town representative ask for additional time, why, you probably should, it sounds fair to me. So in any event, does the applicant have any, additional comments? And I'll talk, we'll hear from the rest of the commission as to whether, the decision right now, do we continue the hearing or do we close it? And then just go into, we wouldn't vote on anything tonight, or who knows when we vote, because that's all we're talking about. So Mr. Henschel, Ms. McCarthy, you have any further comments? And then, or Harry, you have a comment?
Harry Smith, town planner. It's more of a technical thing, actually. I did go through Joe Chadwick's comments and note that some of them are concerned some of the text that already exists in the regulation itself in section 6.3 as it is right now. So whether that runs afoul of due process to start making potential changes to sections of the regulations that weren't going to be modified by the application that's before you and that it already existed. I'll explore with the town council, see what that bright line might be. I think if it's clarification, I don't think it probably runs afoul personally. But as planning staff, but if you're talking about making a regulation more restrictive, if that's the effect of the wording, then maybe that would. So I'll go through them again in more detail and talk about that. So I think it may be, for that basis, it might be also additional reason to keep the public hearing open, even though I could report out after it was closed. But I think it's probably better that I do that before it's closed.
Okay, thank you, Harry. If you're accurate, then we'd have to start over again.
Well, if you want to make all those changes, the other thing we could do is, act on what we got and look at, and frankly, there is some proposed wording smithing that might be great to, the checklist we have in there for site plan and special exception purposes. And that's clearly was not the intent of having them in the regulation amendment, was only to give them a letter designation. So they were, it was clarified what was what in the regs.
Sure.
Wasn't to really alter those sections of the appendices.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, Mr. Henschel, Ms. McCarthy, any further comments before we poll the commission about whether to continue or to close?
Yeah, this is Peter Henschel. I don't think that and Shirley can opine on this also, but I don't think that I have anything particularly further to add in terms of public comment. to what's already been said at this point, I would be, and probably Shirley would be happy to sit down with the Economic Development Commission outside of this, being a part of this action and discuss the regulations and what it really means. I don't see the changes that were being made here as particularly onerous from a point of view of the cost of development in general. And I say that with a professional history in this area. And I think that the changes were basically for the betterment of the town and all development that might be coming to the town. But I would be willing to sit down and meet with the commission again. I think if it's going to be between now and September, it would have to be a Zoom meeting, but I'd be willing to do that. But whether the zoning commission wants to close the public hearing, I have no problem with closing it if the town planner wants to just incorporate whatever of Joe Chadwick's comments are appropriate, can be appropriately done. And then the commission could decide subsequently whether, after consultation with the attorney, whether or not some of the provisions we've talked about from a legal point of view can be achieved. I would leave that up to the commission to, discuss and make a determination.
Thank you, Ms. Gensel. Ms. McCarthy, anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the issue is, do we continue this or do we close this public hearing? And just for reference, by the way, the next meeting is July 20th. I unfortunately will not be able to make that meeting. So if we continue to that meeting, Fred, you have the lucky one of running the meeting. So
Okay.
Fred, any thoughts? Continue or?
I think the applicant said they had no more questions. I think we should close the meeting.
Okay. Joe Chadwick? Joe?
Sorry, my mute button stuck again. I have no real opinion one way or the other. Whatever is the most effective administrative path to take is the path we should take. I don't want to close this off from making further adjustments, or if there are any textual changes that come out of the meeting with the Economic Development Commission, if they would have to be, this would have to be initiated. So whatever works out to be the most simple and direct passage.
Harris, with town planner, the commission could not receive any new information through the applicants, and certainly not through the EDC either, if the public hearing is closed. And I couldn't really serve as the conduit for that information. So, and also additionally, commissioners should probably not attend the EDC meeting, because that would, in my mind, constitute ex parte communication. Would be some information you'd received outside of the hearing the other commissioners would not have received, and particularly if the public hearing is closed tonight.
Okay. Joe Vaiuzzo, any thoughts?
I have some thoughts. I'm curious to see if they can talk to the Economic Commission, Perry Maresca, whoever, and come up with might be coming up with something educate us a little more on how we can word some of these possible regulations, and also from the town attorney. I think if we close the hearing now, then we won't be able to any major changes were made, in my opinion. I think open a little bit more and have them hear what the Economic Commission has to say as far as what are, because I think what Perry said is relevant to town's thing,
Chuck Anderson, thank you, Joe. So we're probably in favor of continuing. Massimo?
I'm definitely in favor of continuing it. I just think we need some more clarity on this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sharon?
I really have a lot of mixed feelings about this. I really think that in trying to be clarity for everybody, that it probably would be a good idea for the Economic Development Commission to understand why these regulations are so important. But I really feel that continuing the hearing won't help that. So those kinds of discussions can go on afterwards. So I would vote to close the hearing.
Thanks, Sharon. Okay, my opinion is continue, probably mainly because when a fellow agency from the town makes the request, you probably bend over backwards. Where you could complain, it says, hey guys, it's been around for a while. Why did you you're raising it at the second public hearing now? Why didn't you raise it earlier? And I get that there's a certain amount of frustration. That said, I think just there are enough bigger pictures in my mind that both as the legality, because I don't know what, maybe it's on the edge or something. We could only, the applicant wouldn't be able to respond, depending. There may be an ambiguous decision and the applicant wouldn't be able to say. So there are certain advantages on all sides, I think, for continuing. So that's where I am at. So I've got Fred close, Sharon close, Joe no opinion, Joe Vayuso continue, Massimo continue, and I'm continues. So I think there's, and Marcy's not here. I think that I don't know. I felt probably more continues in there than that's just my reading of the numbers.
If it helps, I continue. I'll vote to continue.
Okay, then Joe.
I thought this was a poll and not a vote.
Yeah, I just, you want this to go smoothly, and even if it's nothing changes, or even if there's opposition, whatever. I don't want the process issue to be an impediment. And if someone claims they didn't have any, they weren't right, they couldn't be heard, they wanted more time. I just don't, and it's from a town agency. I just don't want that to be a reason. Let them oppose it on the merits. So. And we have time. I don't think in the scheme of things it's going to be a big deal. So there we go, because we're not going to vote on this, and there's still textual stuff we would want to do. I don't think we'd even vote on it at our next meeting. So the next question is, when do we continue it to? Do you want to continue to our July 20th meeting? Again, I won't be here, but that would be
Harrison Town Planner, that is the 35th day. So the commission can do that without a time extension, but if it goes beyond that, the applicants will need to grant time extension.
Okay.
Sharon Hutner here, just for everybody's information. I won't be at the July 20th meeting either.
Okay.
I have no problem with, I'm assuming I could watch the video of the July 20th meeting, afterwards for any additional stuff. I assume you wouldn't be voting on it anyway. So.
This is Peter Henschel.
Yes, Peter.
Yeah, if it matters, and it might, I don't think that Shirley and I would have any problem with giving an extension to have the commission allow the commission to have more time to debate on this.
Yeah. Harry Smith Town Planner, unfortunately, we're running into the commission's August adjournment, essentially. So the next regular meeting of the commission after the 20th would be September 6th.
That would be fine.
You have time to get there within the 100 days that are allowed, I believe, but I'll calculate that up. The other question I have is, when would the EDC meeting take place that Perry's talking about?
Well, if we do it till September 6th, that's
not a question. That's not a problem, of course.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, is it even practical to do it by the 20th?
Right. No, that's a good point.
So you have to push it off even further to the 6th.
Yeah. Peter, is 6 okay with you?
It's fine with me. If Shirley, is it okay with you?
Shirley, does that work?
I take it back. It's the 7th of September.
Ms. McCarthy, does that work for you? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, so then let's continue this public hearing to September 7th, and hopefully by then the economic development will meet with Mr. Henschel, Ms. McCarthy, and anyone else that needs to talk. If there's, tree commission, other people, and we'll get a response from the town attorney about the legal question, because those are at least on that specific issue. So,
Okay.
So
and we have a time extension from verbally, correct?
Yeah.
Just for the record.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you need anything formally from us?
You could follow up with an email just so we have something in the record, probably better, but this is fine for now.
Okay. Okay, so this item number 3 is continued to our September 7th meeting. Thank you. That brings us then to item number 4. This is the Anthony Capasso, Walter McGar Jr., the re-subdivision, create 4 new lots from 3 existing properties. And this is an application that we opened on our June 15th meeting, and we continue that to our July 20th meeting. So this one is not taking place this evening. Is that correct, Harry, on item number 4? So we're not hearing that one tonight.
That's correct.
Okay, Evan, thank you. And then the same thing for item number 5, which is the town engineer, John Hefferly. That's the special exception modification to add a municipal above ground fueling facility, an accessory structure, associated grading. And I think that's at the fire station area. So, so it's scheduled for our July 20th meeting. So then that brings us then to item number 6, which is P&D Holding, 107, 109 Monterey Street. This is a special exception for office retail. Is the applicant ready for that one?
Yes.
Okay, and the applicant can proceed with that.
Good evening, everybody. For the record, my name is Timothy Lee. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, P&D Development, who is the current owner of the property, but we're actually here on behalf of ourselves because we're interested in relocating our law office to the property at 107, 109 Monterey. So right now, as the commission is probably aware, the property is on the market for sale. We have a contract to purchase the property subject to zoning contingencies. Property's currently being occupied by the Sea Spa and probably has been for the last 20 some odd years. In addition to the spa, on the first 2 floors, there is a small 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor, which was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission roughly 25 years ago. The law firm is interested in relocating to the Branford, Monterey's location. We currently have 3 offices, 1 in New Haven, 1 in East Haven, and 1 in Branford. And we have a total of 4 lawyers. So we decided that we'd all try to get under one roof, and we've identified this building as a future home for our office. When we originally submitted the application, we had envisioned building a building in the rear, and By the Sea Spa was going to relocate to the rear of the building. Since that time, we've had some discussions with By the Sea Spa, and that wasn't really working out for either side. So we've eliminated that proposal from our application tonight. So we're solely here before you tonight asking for a special permit to allow a change of use from the spa to the law firm. Before you right now is an as-built of the current conditions at the property. The current site plan shows 27 parking spaces, which is more than enough for our use of the property, even in our wildest dreams. And also far exceeds what's required under the zoning regulations. The main house it's going to require some interior work, but we're not proposing any exterior work. We're also not proposing any changes to the landscaping. For those of you who have driven by it, I think it's a very attractive building, and I think By the Sea Spa has done a fantastic job with the landscaping, and we would propose to keep the exterior look of the building as well as the exterior landscaping. As I mentioned, it is going to be our law office. It would be typical business hours for in office use, 7:30 to 8 o'clock through 6 o'clock, mostly Monday through Fridays with the occasional weekend activity at the site. We think it's an appropriate use. There is a number of commercial uses up and down Montauk. As a matter of fact, the property directly to, I guess, the north of you was before Planning and Zoning Commission about a year or so ago. They're also converting that to an office type use. So I think it's consistent with what's going on in the neighborhood, and we would ask the commission approve the application.
Chuck Anderson, thank you, Mr. Lee. Evan, did you prepare a staff report for this one?
I did, and like Attorney Lee had described for us, they're proposing to establish their own office, which is a special exception approval required per our zoning regs. They're also proposing a retail under 3,000 square feet space, as well as to maintain an existing residential unit. Just to clarify for the commission, the original plan that was circulated to you guys did include a proposed building in the rear of the existing one to house, I believe, the By the Sea Spa. However, the applicant had altered their submitted plans to exclude that from the site plan. So just wanted to clarify that for the commissioners. Both of the proposed uses require special exceptions in the BR zoning district. The applicant meets the bulk requirements for that district. They appeared before the Town Center Board on June 28th and received a positive recommendation. No landscaping plan was submitted. However, they did propose, or they did include some vegetation on the submitted site plans. They also meet the parking requirements, and no lighting information had been submitted, but a condition has been added that would require compliance with section 6.7. There's no regrading as a part of the application, and based on the application materials, it appears the special exception criteria are generally satisfied. Staff recommends one finding or two findings that is subject to the compliance with the conditions listed below. The commission finds that the special exception criteria are satisfied. Finding number two is that this approval exclusively applies to the establishment of the general or business office use, as well as the retail under 3,000 square foot use at this location, and no changes to the site plan are part of this approval. I did add an extra condition this afternoon. So I'm just going to bring that up quickly. And that is, I'll start with condition 1. Prior to the issuance of a zoning permit or a building permit, the following shall be addressed to the satisfaction to the town planner or his designee. The applicant shall submit a site plan showing the existing conditions of the lot are proposed to remain, specifically the proposed location of the accessory structure shall be removed and the existing parking spaces shall be shown. Additionally, I added that the applicant shall submit a site plan that shows the existing fence on the southern property line be extended to the rear of the property line. And that is this fence here, which only extends about halfway or a little bit more than halfway down that property line. And going back to the conditions, and the final condition is that any lighting has to be compliant with section 6.7 of our regulations.
Thank you, Evan. I noticed in terms of extending the fence, I thought you showed one big tree there. Is there any issue with respect to extending the fence, getting too close to that tree or anything? Did you look at that?
Tim, would you be able to comment?
Looking at the site plan, there are a number of trees along the southern boundary of the property. We'd be happy to try to accommodate a fence on the property. I'm not opposed to that. I do not know as a practical matter if the trees are going to present a problem for that, but we can do our best to work around that.
I can alter the language of the condition to reflect that.
Okay. Great. Any questions, comments from commission members before we open up to the public?
Nobody also has a question.
Joe.
Where the added building was proposed, what is that property being used for right now?
Not a whole. So there's the main building, and behind it is a small garage type structure. I think nominally it's being used for storage. We don't have a use for it. If we identify a use for the property, we may come back before you in a number of years and try to do something with that building. But right now, the proposal is not to do anything with that building and just let it stay there.
That's where where you were going to build that proposed thing?
More or less. So that building doesn't comply with the side yard setback. So basically what we're going to do is take the square footage of that building, relocate it more into the center of the property so that it would comply with the setbacks. Right now it's pre-existing non-conforming from the setbacks on the northerly boundary of the property.
Well, I thought I didn't know if it was vacant property or not. I see something here.
Yeah, I think the current owner uses it for some storage.
So is there any opportunity to put some of this parking in reserve that you don't need if you don't need all those spaces?
Well, it's an existing situation right now. So the map you have before you represents the existing conditions on the site. So that's already been paved and that's already been striped. So we're not proposing to do anything different, more or less, with the parking than what's there right now.
I wasn't sure what it was.
Thank you, Joe and Mr. Lee. Any other questions, comments from commission members before we open up to the public? Sharon?
Sharon Putner. I would just like to make a few suggestions along the same vein as Joe was talking about. If you have too much parking, more than you need, I would suggest that you might consider putting in electric charging stations and utilize some of those parking spots. That way there are still incentives being offered by Eversource, especially for workplace parking charging stations. So if you want the references, I can get that to you. And another suggestion is think about maybe building some raised beds somewhere along in the parking lot. Maybe take one space away in the center and build a raised bed and have a pollinator garden or something like that, just to enhance the property. And I think it's a great idea for you to be moving to Branford.
Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Hey, Chuck Anderson, thank you, Sharon. Any other questions, comments from commission members before we open up to the public? Hearing none, does any member of the public wish to comment? Evan, you see anybody?
I do not see anyone, but just to reiterate, there's a reactions button down at the bottom of your screen. From there, you can press raise hand if you'd like to speak, and you can also type into the chat that you'd like to comment. I do not see any.
Okay, any further comments from the applicant? Mr. Lee?
No, just thank you for the time. We do look forward to moving to Branford and all being under one roof in town. It'll probably be a year or so before we get out there. By the Sea Spa needs time to relocate as well, but we're working with them, and hopefully they'll find a place to live, and we'll be out in Branford in a matter of months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. We're going to have the great legal minds right here in Branford. There we go. Any other comments from commission members or staff?
Harry Smith, town planner. Following up on Sharon's comment, staff has some language you commission could consider to put on any approval you want to vote on tonight. It basically would say EV charging stations may be added as well, or may be added without further approval by the commissioner and staff. So that we release the applicant from the requirement to get a site plan approval, whether by the commission or by staff, if they wanted to go ahead and put EV charging stations in. They would just simply need to get a building permit.
Great. Chuck Anderson, thank you, Harry. Any other comments from commission members or staff? Not, then we'll close this item of the public hearing. And again, this may be something we can take up in a little bit. That brings us then to item number 7, which is Patricia Pearson, 10 Tyler Avenue, a special exception for grading for a terrace. Is the applicant ready with that?
Harry, could you make Tim Keniston a co-host, please?
Sure. Okay, Mr. Kennison, you should be able to unmute yourself and share your screen as well.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? My name is Tim Kennison. I'm a landscape architect with Water Street Design Associates, and we've been hired by Patricia and Randall Pearson for the landscape design at their property at 10 Tyler Avenue. We worked on the site plan that's part of the application that you see before you. Do I have screen sharing ability?
You do.
Okay, great. If everybody can see the screen in front of them, there should be a site plan. So what we're asking for in this application is for the ability to grade within 100 feet of the mean high water mark. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. So the mean high water mark runs along the seawall on the south side of the property. 10 Tyler Avenue enters the property further north to the west. And we're asking for permission to grade with special respect to a terrace on the water side of the house. So when we were hired to design the landscape for this property, we kind of inherited this pre-approved plan, which shows the house and also a terrace and some grading on the waterside property that's very similar to what we're proposing. But what we realized after kind of looking at this plan more analytically is that there wasn't actually any steps coming out of the rear of the house down onto the terrace. And the way the heights worked out of the elevation of the terrace, the elevation of the door, and the elevation of the grade, there wasn't really enough room horizontally on the map to have a landing and enough steps to kind of get you from point A to point B vertically. So I'm going to go back to our proposed plan here. So this shows our proposed terrace, and the red lines here is that previously approved terrace and those steps. So as you can see, if I zoom in a little bit here, these are the doors coming off the water side of the house at 17.5. And we just didn't have enough room to get a landing and enough steps to get down to the other terrace. You can see these steps here, they kind of overlap on the other steps. Another piece of this was that we didn't really want to have just a long run of one set of steps where you come down and you're going down 6 or 7 steps in a row. We wanted to be able to kind of break it up a little bit. And kind of have them melt into the landscape a little bit more.
I gotta look at it, so it's fine. I don't have to do it.
So to be able to do that, we had to enlarge the terrace a little bit, but we also opened up planting areas on that terrace so that we could soften the appearance of the stone on the foundation and on the steps. And we actually lowered the terrace elevation from 15.25, which was the previous version here in red, and we're actually proposing at 14.5. As part of our plan, we included a section showing that at the highest point, the terrace to the grade would be 2 feet. In many other areas, is actually much less than that. And also, kind of with respect to the grading required for the terrace, we feel conceptually it's kind of within what was already approved. Going back to this older plan, you can see the 13 contour and the 12 are kind of bunched up here on the water side. it created a little bit of an unnatural berm going down to the water. So we kind of just stretched them out a little bit on our drawing just to make it a little bit more natural looking. And as you can see, everything hatched in view here is all planting beds. So we're really trying to plant this up as much as possible around all the hardscape, just to soften the visual appearance and just kind of make, you know, the terrace and the steps just kind of melt into the landscape a little bit more.
Thank you, Mr. Kensington. Is it, did I get that right? Keniston?
Yeah, Keniston, yeah.
Keniston.
Close, thank you.
And anything else?
I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, great, thank you. Evan, did you prepare the staff report on this one?
I did, and like Mr. Kensington had described for us, they are proposing to modify a previously approved site plan for a single-family home. One single-family home. This property actually has an additional home on it, but they are proposing to widen and regrade the area around a terrace or a proposed terrace, which happens to be less than 100 feet from the mean high water mark, which is why it's triggering a special exception approval from this commission. The applicant did not provide a landscaping plan. However, extensive landscaping is provided on the plans that they had submitted. They meet the parking requirements. No lighting was submitted. No lighting plan was submitted as part of this application. However, a condition has been added that would require any lighting be compliant with section 6.7. They did not provide an erosion and control plan. However, they did provide erosion control measures on the submitted site plan. Staff wanted the applicant to amend this site plan to show additional silt fencing along the two adjacent property lines so as to stop any erosion onto the two neighboring properties. The earth slopes are compliant and there was no stockpile on the site plan. However, the applicant has indicated that they can add that to the site plan. Based on the application materials, the applicant satisfies the special exception criteria of section 9.8F. Staff recommends two findings, one of which I added this afternoon. Let me just bring it up for everyone. The first finding is that the commission finds that the property is consistent with the special exception criteria. And the second is after some discussion this morning, we wanted to clarify why this application does not require a CAM application. Section 5.1C4 indicates that modifications to construction of or modifications to existing terraces is exempt from CAM applications. So this finding states that based on the testimony and application materials, the proposed construction is considered to be a modification of an existing terrace and is exempt from a coastal site plan application per section 5.1C4. Staff recommends three conditions prior to the issuance of a zoning or building permit. Site plan shall be amended to show additional erosion control measures along the two adjacent property lines where regrading is proposed. Additionally, prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, erosion controls measures shall be installed and maintained throughout construction. And then our final condition is that any proposed lighting must be compliant with section 6.7.
Chuck Industry, thank you, Evan. Questions or comments from members of the commission or staff before we open up to the public?
Chuck, Fred Russo.
Fred.
Just a clarification. The attorney mentioned, the applicant mentioned that, the landscape architect mentioned that the terrace was formally approved or previously approved. When was that? I'm just curious.
2019, I believe. They came in for building permits and it was reviewed by the zoning enforcement officer.
Okay, and so that was an approved application.
Yes.
And they're just making changes to the existing. Okay, thank you.
Chuck and Chair, thank you, Fred. Any other questions, comments from commission members or staff before we open up to the public? Hearing none, any member of the public wish to comment?
I believe Jean would like to speak. Jean, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes.
There you go.
My question has to do with the long line of, I'm not sure what they are, trees, shrubs, where there's an existing fence right now. And I'd like to know what those are and how they will be controlled to be only on the property at number 10, Tyler. Because even now, the way they're drawn, you can see they're poking through the property line. This becomes a big issue because our home, my husband and I, are at 6, Tyler, directly next door. And the hedge and other things along the fence impede on our property a lot, and especially a tree where it says existing pine, existing oak. Those both have branches that some of the oak were really scrubbing against our house. Those, thank you for whoever did that. Those have been trimmed back, but there's a large limb of a real large branch of that very big pine tree that we would really like to have removed. And I want to know, since it's on our side of the property, it doesn't seem to damage the tree any. Can we have that removed? And it's a bit of an issue for me. I have mobility issues. These pine cones and all those needles are constantly on our little patio that's very close to the property. I would like to know what's going to happen to that long line. There are like 3 dozen of those trees on our side and on the far side of the next gentleman's property, Mr. Custer. But I'm really concerned about making sure that those are taken care of and don't, grow into our property.
Checking to share. Thank you, Jean. Can you just state your name for the record, please?
Jean Leffer.
Thank you. Mr. Kinston, can you address that?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Jean. Thank you for your question. I can't really speak to the existing trees just because we're obviously doing our best as a landscape architect to preserve the existing trees on the property because there aren't many. But I can address your question with regard to the hedging that's shown on the plan along the property line. As part of the application, we had submitted a proposed plant list, and on that list we had a couple options for screening evergreens that were intended to give privacy. One of those options is emerald green arborvitae, which is a very narrow columnar formed plant. So they really only get 30 inches to, at the very most, at mature, 3 feet wide. So the intention would be to use those species which are more compact along your property line to provide, the maximum amount of separation for you and your neighbors without having it infringe on your property.
Well, what will happen when they do? Will the existing fence be removed?
I'm not sure if that's part of this application. I don't have that information. I apologize.
Well, it's not in terribly good shape. The Pearsons did put it in a number of years ago. If some fence remains, that will keep those emerald green,
yeah,
over there. But if the fence is removed, they will surely grow onto our property. And it's been a problem. My husband and I are elderly and retired and love our home here. And it's really hard to keep our property and not have all those things already, the hedge and other things growing. It's held back quite a bit with the fence. That's been fine. But I really would like to ask that somehow some arrangements be made for those emerald green Aphrodite to be, I mean, once they've grown, if they're on our property, it just takes away the small amount of space we have there. And I'd like to know how that's going to be controlled.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable concern. And when we get to the planting plan, part of the project where we're doing the landscaping, I'll certainly confer with the owners and we'll discuss how best to address that concern.
Okay, and is it okay if we or someone they wish to, please remove this limb that's way over our property and has it on our patio? I noticed that they did trim some of it, but they left that.
I'll certainly bring that up with the Pearsons as something that is of concern to you that, should be addressed.
Is that something that we can just do that when something's on our side of the property?
Typically, if something's leaning on your side of the property, you're usually allowed to prune on your side of the property line.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to certainly be cooperative and work cooperatively about it, but we would appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'll bring that up with the Pearsons and we'll certainly discuss that.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Harry Smith, Town Planner. Mr. Keniston, these are the emerald green giant arborvitae. They're mature width. Have you plotted that out on the site plan? I don't know how tight it is there, but it seems like a pretty reasonable request to have them move back so they're planted no closer than the distance of, half the mature width of the plant.
Sure, we could certainly move that back. I think a lot of the planting at this stage is more conceptual, just showing that there would be some form of evergreen screening along that property line. And we have the plant list to suggest what these could be, but it's not shown plant per plant exactly perfectly. So we could certainly move that back. There's room to do so there.
Okay, and I think that probably would solve the issue, just so that it's, and a little bit of extra wiggle room, just so it's, a few feet further inboard, if you will, than the ultimate half width of the plant, so that they're not going to get large parts of the mature arborvitae trying to extend into their yard.
Right.
Absolutely. I think that sounds completely reasonable. And I think we have 4 feet from the property line to where we're showing the parking. And I think we can move those in.
Yeah. I mean, I think that could be handled with a note on the plan too, just specifying that. So it's clear to all that's the, intention. And we can get into the details of, how, I mean, the landscape plan typically is not, scientifically precise, if you will,
yeah.
but it's approximately precise. So if it's in your mind already needing adjustments or it really hasn't crystallized, then there probably would have to be some kind of process for, if the commission's comfortable having staff review and approve, the plan you finally arrive at in terms of the details and locations and numbers of plants and where they would be and so forth.
Sure.
Harry, my question, Joe Ayuso, when you're planting on a property line, don't you don't normally plant on the line, don't you bring it in so you automatically?
Yeah, well, Harry, so typically yes. Depending on how tight the site is, sometimes people don't have anything and don't particularly care whether the a few feet of their property is gobbled up by some vegetation. So sometimes people are fine with it on the property line, but that's certainly not the case here. So I think it makes sense to kind of make sure that it's as far back as necessary in terms of where it's actually placed, into the ground.
Those emerald arborvitae, are you looking for height or
No, the width. So they get to be what, 3 or 4 or 5 feet wide at maturity, something like that?
Typically less than that.
Less than that?
Yeah, typically
Okay.
like 3 feet the most. They're pretty tight.
Oh, all right.
They're like
Yeah,
soldiers.
Yeah, I've seen them a little healthier and wider, but maybe 4. But I think making sure they're at least 2.5, 3 feet back, just so there's some room there that they won't intrude in.
Absolutely. I think that's very reasonable.
Okay.
I mean, in my case, I planted a bunch of arborvitae over here, and I planted 2 feet in from the line, and I got I don't know, remember the variety name, but it's a much denser and lower growing arborvitae. The maximum height on that arborvitae, they've been there now almost 15 years, and they're not even 7 feet tall. And they don't get wide or tall. So
Yeah. Well, don't these get pretty large though? The giant, the emerald green.
they're about 3 feet, but I know they get taller.
Yeah.
And there's many, sorry to interrupt, this is Tim again. There's many different varieties of arborvitae. Green giants are typically the most common, and they're vigorous growers, and they'll get, typically you space them 5 feet on center, and they can grow up, as much as 10 feet wide. The emerald greens are much tighter and more appropriate to the scale of the neighborhood for sure. I mean, it's a tight lot on the Pearson side as well. So, we're definitely trying to conserve space, but also provide some greenery.
Okay, thank you.
Areas, you need to be considerate of situation is, you don't have the room. You have to consider using a variety that's going to stay very dense.
Right.
Yeah, that all makes perfect sense. Yep.
Is there a fence there? The lady Jean mentioned something about a fence. Is there a fence there now?
Yes.
But sounded pretty somewhat deteriorated in condition or aged or whatever. Is that correct? Okay.
Is there like a stockade fence with block, or is it like rail, like a rail fence, like something that plants can go through?
No, it's solid fence. Solid,
I think the proposal was to take it down though, right? Again, Harry Smith, town planner.
I don't think the applicant
said either way.
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, no, that wasn't
part of the application.
Yeah, that wasn't part of the application.
Okay.
I'd like to know that would help us to know if the fence is going to stay. If we could sometime know that would be great.
Is that fence going to stay? Sir?
I don't have the authority to make that call, so I can't promise one way or the other, but we're certainly open to discussing it. That's about all I can have the authority to say on this call. I apologize.
I think it was something that should be. I think something like that should be answered, because why would you put those tight arborvitaes there if you got the fence?
Hey, Joe, I think the property owner actually wants to speak.
Great. Chuck Ander's chair. Let's allow the property owner, if they're available, they can address that. So, Evan, why don't you let them unmute them?
Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Pearson.
Yes, we're intending on keeping the fence.
Thank you for the clarification.
All right, thank you. And we certainly don't want to go over the property line.
No, it's the maintenance issue too. When they need to be trimmed or whatever annually or biannually. Somebody's got to get on that side and do the maintenance work and the cleanup and all that. So it involves
yes, we continually maintain it, and we have a tree man go in and trim.
And I'm sure the Pearsons heard the request that the limb that's hanging over the property, if you could remove that.
So.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? Commission members? or any other member of the public wish to comment?
Just to reiterate, down at the bottom of your screen, you can press the reactions button and then raise hand if you'd like to speak. I do not see anyone else.
Okay. Any further comments by the applicant? Mr. Kenson?
No more comments.
Okay. Any further questions or comments by commission or staff, members or staff? Hearing none, then we'll close this matter as a public hearing. So we can bring this up in a little bit. So thank you very much. So then that's public hearing number 7. And I think that completes our public hearing scheduled for this evening. Moving on to our agenda, we have the minutes from our June 15th meeting. Those were sent out to us. If anyone would like to make an appropriate motion with respect to those minutes from our June 15th.
Fred Russo will make that motion.
Motion to approve the minutes of our June 15th meeting made by Fred. Is there a second?
Chadwick, second.
Second by Joe Chadwick. All those in favor. By the way, who's voting? Marcy's out. Who's up? Harry, do you know?
Unfortunately, I do not know. Harrison Town Planner. So I would pose the question to Sharon or Massimo. Do you remember who was the last to vote?
Massimo? So this is Massimo here speaking. Last time it was Sharon, but we ended up both voting.
Because there were 2 absent? Okay.
Correct. So, I mean, Sharon, if you'd like to vote, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm not going to be at the next meeting, so why don't
Yeah,
I vote?
so go right ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So then, motion been made and seconded to approve minutes. All those in favor. Joe Chadwick, you in favor?
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo.
Fred Russo's in favor.
Joe Vayuzo.
Vayuzo in favor.
Sharon Hutner.
Sharon Hutner is in favor.
And Chair is also in favor. So the minutes are approved. So then let's go back then on the public hearing items that we have considered. So I think the first one was number 2. That was the 6.8 grading for the pool at 117 Flax Mill Road. Evan, can you pull up that resolution? Okay, and this one was this was again the after the fact application. The prior owner had done some illegal grading, I guess. And so this was had to get a few variances, and this was the 6.8 blessing of that, so they can get the pool in. Seemed pretty straightforward. And Evan, I think you've mentioned it's the standard finding of compliance, and then the 2 conditions, one about the erosion control, the standard erosion control being installed, and then the lighting condition. So does anyone have any questions or comments? And if not, would someone make a motion to approve this application by adopting the findings and 2 conditions set forth in the staff report that's prepared by Evan, that's currently being projected before us, and that's the staff report for our meeting of tonight.
Chadwick makes that motion.
Motion made by Joe Chadwick to approve. Is there a second?
Vayuzo seconds.
Second by Joe Vayuzo. Any further discussion? All those in favor. Joe Chadwick.
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo.
Fred Russo in favor.
Joe Vayuzo.
Vayuzo in favor.
Sharon. Sharon, you're muted.
He's muted.
Sharon Hutner is in favor.
Yes, and Chair is also in favor, so that application is approved. So that was item number 2. I think the next one was number 6. And that was the law office, the by the spa conversion, simple change of use, changing the use from the by the spa facility to a law office. Again, no changes to the buildings or structure. There were some suggestions. I guess the conditions are pre-existing. I think there were some helpful suggestions by commission members and staff regarding charging and possibly landscape isling. And I think we added the condition about the fence. Is that right? Is that the new one, extending the fence?
Yes, I added that this afternoon, but during the meeting, I changed that to read that the site plan shall be amended, showing the existing fence on the southern property line shall be extended as far as possible to the rear property line without interfering with existing vegetation.
Okay, so we got it. Okay.
Evan Harris with Town Planner. Can we make 1-1-1A and 1-2-1B just to make it a little easier to follow these things? Perfect. Thank you. And then that would all. What happened there? There we go. Thank you.
Okay, so just for the record, Evan's made those changes to the proposed resolution.
And I had also added this additional condition that the site plan may be modified as necessary to the satisfaction of the town planner to include EV charging stations.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, so any questions or comments? Now, does someone make a motion to approve the application by adopting the findings and conditions in the staff report as has been recently modified and has been projected in front of us and explained by staff?
Fred Russo makes that proposal. Yes.
Motion made by Fred to approve. Is there a second?
Sharon Hutner seconds.
Second by Sharon. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe Chadwick?
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo in favor.
Joe Vayuzo?
All in favor.
Sharon Hutner?
Sharon Hutner is in favor.
And Chair is also in favor. So that brings us into item number 7, which is 10 Tyler Avenue. That's the item, the terrace that we were just considering. You heard from Mr. Kenston. And Evan, you want to pull that one up?
Yes. So the underlined finding is the one that I added this afternoon, stating that this falls into one of the exemption categories from section 5.1 C. And then during this meeting, I added the condition that the arborvitae proposed along the western property line shall be relocated farther from the property line. I didn't get into too many specifics about, the intent or the extent of how we can enforce this. So if there's any suggestions for additional changes to the language, please let me know.
Okay. I think we got clarification that the fence is going to still be there, correct?
It's true.
Okay.
So I can remove this if you guys would like me
No,
to.
it's I mean, you could put propose shall be relocated further than property line to ensure that the mature tree does not intrude upon the neighbor's property or something.
Intrude, was that the word used?
Yeah, or I don't want to say trespass.
There's something we can do to include the existing vegetative situation there with that tree. They're
Oh, you mean
about
to remove the limb?
Yeah, or whatever, or see to it that generally speaking, to make sure that it doesn't encroach on other people's properties.
I think that's probably an over. This is a grading permit. It sounded like they want to be good neighbors. And they removed one, but that one hadn't been removed yet. But they can do it. And frankly, I think if it intrudes on your property, they have the right to remove it themselves. So, yeah.
Or that you made the comment, so now they know about it.
Right. Yeah, I think they've said so. I assume they'll act in good faith. They've got the message. So, okay. Anything else? from anyone? Any thoughts or? If the, and I agree with the finding that it comes within the exemption for the CAM. I've read that exemption. I agree as well. I'm glad we put that in. So if it looks okay with everyone, would someone make a motion to approve the application by adopting the staff recommendations, the 2 findings and the conditions as modified and presented and shown to us now on the screen?
Joe Vayuso moves to approve.
Motion made by Joe Vayuso to approve. Is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second by Joe Chadwick. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe Chadwick?
Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo in favor.
Joe Vayuso?
Still in favor.
Massimo? Excuse me, Sharon, sorry.
Sharon Hutner is in favor.
And Chair is also in favor. Okay, so that brings us then, where are we? We are at under new business.
I think we skipped correspondence, Harry.
Oh yeah, correspondence. What's going on? Anything?
We do have one item. It is in reference to a cell tower at 190 Totucket Road, which is on the way down to the Tilcon plant, approximately a little further south than the little parking area for the trolley trail, if anyone's familiar. So I think this is that's the star, but I believe the proposal is to put an installation right on the Tilcon building itself. And I believe this, it's a dish wireless equipment platform and auxiliary ancillary equipment. So it's basically a cell tower installation. And that's it.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Harry. So let's go under, I think this is, we have some old business under new business, but item number 1, we have a public hearing scheduled for our next meeting. Item number 2 is a PDD master plan modification. We'll need to schedule that for a public hearing. I understand the application is incomplete at this point, so
yes,
when it's ready. And that's 2.
It will likely be for the 7th of September, just because we only commission only have 65 days to schedule it, and it was received on the 15th of June, so that would be the last possible date. Actually,
okay, that's Sterling Ridge.
Correct.
The never-ending Sterling Ridge.
No, so I would schedule all 3 for that date.
Right.
Do that.
And then what's item number 5 is looks like new business is special exception for indoor recreation. Need to schedule a public hearing for that one at 67 North Branford Road. So
yeah, we could do that as staff in conjunction with you, Mr. Chairman, per the standing policy on that, if you'd like.
Okay. And also same thing for Lakeview.
Yes.
It's a signage modification, looks like.
Yeah.
Okay. That brings us into other business. And then item number 1 is an informal discussion proposed PDD district for 325 East Main Street, the former Regal Cinema site. It's applicant here on that one. Good evening, Mr. Nuff.
So I have should be all set to go, Mr. Nuff.
He's muted.
Yeah, I've made you co-host. Should be able to unmute as you wish. No? Well, I'll ask you to see if that works.
There you go.
Now you're set.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Harry. And by the way, I emailed Evan earlier who was going to be presenting. So let me get the niceties out of the way. My name is John Nuff. I'm an attorney with an office at 147 Broad Street, and I'm here tonight on behalf of CP Branford LLC. With me this evening is John Schmitz, who's a professional engineer at BL Companies. He's going to be sharing his screen, but the other presenters are going to be Don Mancini from BL Companies and also Ray Sullivan from Ray Sullivan Architecture. Those are the folks we're going to be addressing this evening. So CP Branford LLC is a contract purchaser of the property 325 East Main Street As you all know, there's an existing Walgreens on the site, as well as a vacant Regal Cinema building that has been vacant for approximately 2 years or so. The site consists of 13.75 acres, but according to your regulations, you have to deduct wetlands and steep slopes. So that brings it down to 11.12 acres. So we lose about 2.5 acres, actually more than 2.5 acres, as a result of the elimination of wetlands and steep slopes. And there's some few other issues that we'll get to later. As you know, there's a large sea of parking adjacent to the theater building. Obviously, to park the theater, a lot of impervious coverage, and the property directly abuts the exit 55 ramps. The general area surrounding the property is exactly what you'd expect, surrounding a limited access highway exit. There's a number of hotels, there's a number of restaurants, there's a car dealer, there's a number of auto-related uses, gas stations, auto repair, car wash, there's some retail sites, medical office, some multifamily down the street, and then obviously, as you all know, there is the industrial zone a short distance away to our northeast. So there is a collection of uses, and what we're proposing is consistent with the surrounding uses, but also gives us an opportunity to beautify the site. There's a couple of things that make the site, sort of an interesting opportunity, but also a challenging opportunity to redevelop. As I said, there's an existing Walgreens on the property, which is a strong tenant and gives us a really good starting point. We have the existing cinema building, which is in very good shape. It's a really wonderful opportunity for adaptive reuse. In terms of, adaptive reuse, certainly there's no windows in a movie theater. And so what we're going to be showing you later is self-storage, which seems to make the most sense. But, this building has considerable value unto itself, and it seems silly to try to eliminate that building, but it seems a lot more wise and, environmentally friendly to reuse that building in a productive manner. There are a large amount of wetlands to the southeast of the site, sort of in a wooded area to the southeast. We'll be describing to you some deed restrictions where we're not allowed to build even within what is currently the paved portion based upon long-standing deed restrictions and agreement with the neighbors back when the cinema site was first developed. One interesting element is that we have an existing traffic signal, which certainly lends itself to redevelopment of the site. And the site is generally very, very well maintained. I think if anyone's been out there, they know that it's been, clean and well kept. And so this is not a site that, anyone's going to scrape and redevelop, but try to take what's there, enhance it to the best of their ability, and then see what other opportunities are there that are consistent with the area and that will help generate more taxes. So there's a lot to take into account. And so what we're proposing, Smitty, if you can go on to the overall site plan. Let's give John a second.
Hey, Harry, do you have to give him share with John? Share.
No, he's sharing his screen right now.
Okay.
So I think it's on his end. He's got permission from us. So it looks like he's frozen for some reason, perhaps.
Hey, Harry, can you unmute John? If you can just tell us what's going on.
He should be able to unmute himself too, but I'll try that too.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, John.
Okay. Can you see the screen? I can see everybody.
Right.
We just see the aerial.
John, we can see the aerial, but can you put up the site plan?
That's what I'm showing now. I have the
maybe you've got the wrong screen shared.
Let me just retry that then.
Yeah, there you go. I think you have to close out and then,
There we go.
perfect, thank you. All right, so what we're showing is 4 lots. In the bottom left is lot number 1, which is the existing Walgreens. Lot number 2 would be the adaptive reuse of the existing cinema building into self-storage. Parcel number 3 would be located directly adjacent to East Main Street, which would be a small upscale coffee shop, and as well as another restaurant use. And then on parcel number 4 would be our multifamily community consisting of 120 units. 10% we would deed as affordable. There'd be 8 studios, 69 1-bedrooms, and 43 2-bedrooms. And you see that there's a dashed line crossing through from sort of the top of the page to the bottom. And that is the area where we cannot build any new buildings based upon our existing deed restrictions with the residential neighbors. And that is longstanding. So this is another, complicating factor in terms of how we arrived at the proposed configuration. As I said, we would propose that each of these uses would be located on their own lots. There will obviously be cross easements between each of the parcels. Each parcel does have frontage on East Main Street, but not each would have its own entrance onto Main Street. You would operate as one holistic site, but there would be an opportunity to subdivide and convey out separate parcels. In particular, the multifamily building that would be constructed by my client's partner, Alex Bigliotti. I know the commission knows Alex well and his good work throughout town. And so he would be playing an important and critical role in the redevelopment of this property. And he and his architect, Ray Sullivan, have developed an extremely attractive building to highlight the sites. So, in short, and Don Mancini is going to walk you through the site plan, some of the renderings, but, this proposed layout will largely reflect the existing nearby uses while respecting the wetlands, respecting the no build restriction, making the site far more attractive, and obviously providing an important economic benefit to the town. So happy to discuss that a little bit further. We've read Harry's memo with regard to the PDD, and I'm certainly very much aware of what your POCD says about such things. But this is a unusual site for the reasons I just described. In particular, the fact that we have an existing building that's in very good repair, and it would be a shame to somehow not utilize that in a productive fashion. So with that, let me give you to Don Mancini, and he can walk you through the renderings and some other site plans.
Thank you, John. Good evening, members of the commission. John Mancini, principal with BL Companies, 355 Research Parkway, Meriden, Connecticut. I'm also a Branford resident myself. As you guys know, the site has had a long history of development. The restriction line that's on here actually was not put on when we developed the Hoyts. I'm going to date myself. That was in the late 90s. So, and our company was involved in that project. This restriction went on in the 70s when it was developed to be a Stop and Shop, a Bradley's, and I think it was called a Medimart. And that's how Walgreens actually got their script license at that time to operate their business. So at that time, they had an agreement with this neighborhood above us that said no structures can be built in their buildings. So in the late 90s, when the Hoyts was developed, we respected that line. So you can see the existing Hoyts cinema building was built right up against that line. So walking through the site plan, as John mentioned, back when the Walgreens was developed, the parking regulations were a little bit more robust in terms of what was required for parking back then. So There's a lot more parking around the pharmacy than you would probably build today. So as a result of that, we are removing some of that parking as well in that area. The coloring on this plan is a little off. There should be more green up in this area. Yeah, thank you, John. But in addition, the theater back then required a lot of parking, as John said. This theater, if I remember correctly, had around 1,200 seats. The building was built with stadium seating. It's got a rat slab in it, which means it's got elevated floors. And when you go to do an adaptive reuse of this building, it's simply, there is no floor there. You have to start with, removing all the elevated seating, removing the platform floors, and then constructing a floor. There's no windows, as John said. So it's really, we have developed these theaters into storage, and you can do a 2-story storage in here because the storage units themselves will be self-supported. And therefore, the skin of this building could be changed. We've done a couple of these buildings. And if you look along 95 in Branford and Stratford, you'll see some buildings that look like office buildings that are actually storage buildings. So we do plan on modifying the skin, the outer shell of this building on the 2 street sides to, make it with some like materials to the other materials that are being used on the property, but no change to the footprint, the entrance to the storage facility. So this is a perspective looking across the existing parking lot of some of the changes to this building that could be made to enhance the look of it and change it from the theater look. John, go back to the site plan for a second. So the site has a long history of development and some intense development. So what we're talking about doing is we're talking about the new development, the 2 new pads, building 4 and building 3, will fall entirely in the existing pavement envelope that's there. And in fact, there's a large green area in front of building 4 between East Main Street that's currently pavement, and a large area on the backside, which we call outdoor amenity space, that's all pavement. We are substantially reducing the pavement or impervious area on this site by being able to go to these types of uses. By going to a single building, we're able to put the building density all in one spot and really take advantage of not spreading out footprints everywhere. But as you see, if, until you saw the site plan, no one would know that there's this restrictive building line out there. You're standing in the middle of the parking lot and you don't know why the theater was built where it was. So it was important for us to come before you and show you this map. The reuse of the theater really works well for a storage building. Storage requires very minimal parking. The entrance to the storage will be on the front. It'll be gated access control on the backside with minimal parking. The loading will be screened and in that area. We're talking about, direct access to, we are the 4th leg at the light. In fact, this property developed and installed this light when this property got developed in the late 90s. And then Zane Cycles and Citizens Bank benefited from becoming the 4th leg later in time, probably about 10 years ago. There's a town-owned sewer pump station in the back corner of the site that has to be, John, below, come down closer. Yeah, right in that area, right there. And the town has an easement over that. And we will be maintaining that easement, and they will have access to the pump station. I mentioned the reduction in the impervious coverage, and then we will also be proposing to meet but not exceed the required parking that's needed. There's a min and a max, and we're a little bit above the minimum requirement to address and meet the needs of the type of units, as John mentioned, the number of 1-bedrooms and studio, as well as 2 bedrooms. With us tonight is Ray, who will talk a little bit about the building architecture, Ray Sullivan. John, if you can show the rendering that was done for the front building. So the front building, this is a look from when you come in the main entrance, and you're looking back at the building. You're standing at the front door of, say, the storage facility entrance at that main location on the site plan looking back. It's not a very large building. It's a couple thousand, I forget exactly, 2,400 square foot coffee shop and another couple thousand square feet of restaurant space next to it, which would work well with the proposed residential mixed use on site. Okay, John. Yep, thank you. These are just different views. All right. And then if Mr. Sullivan, if Ray, if you can hop on and discuss your building a little, and then we can wrap it up and give it back to John.
Sure. John, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Ray.
My name is Ray Sullivan of the Sullivan Architectural Group. I'm at 127 Broad Street in Milford, on the Milford Green. This building has a footprint of 34,000 square feet. It's got a gross floor area of approximately 136,000 square feet. John reviewed that it's 120 units and reviewed the type of units there are and how many of each unit. But if I kind of talk about the architecture a little bit, I think we've got an attractive and a well-proportioned building. Exactly what it looks like in its final form is going to depend on the final selection of materials, and the colors of those materials. So, I think that this building can be transitional, which is somewhere in between traditional and contemporary. As you look at this elevation, it's got a series of bays. They're three-story bays. The bays do not go down to the first floor. Those bays are clad in a flat trim. So if that bay were painted cream or white or some kind of off-white, it would look very traditional. But in terms of kind of trying to make the building give itself a strong identity in the design, we like the darker tone. The base building material is actually a horizontal siding. We're looking at a shiplap siding with a large joint, so it creates kind of these relief lines. And we're looking at this kind of muted red tone, which I think goes well with the dark gray. We've also are open to and have investigated the building to be brick. And again, what that final look is, if it were brick and the bays were a creamy color, I mean, it would look much different than it is now. But again, we can make it look, we can make it have different looks to it. But we like this look because we think it's very well proportioned and it's attractive. The only bold pieces are the corners, which tend to be these glass towers, but it's a good sized building. And I think the glass towers help give the building identity and kind of anchor it down. Every unit would have a balcony. So you're going to have the traditional railings, at all those balconies, and the windows are intended to suggest a divided light, windows, again, which would, also be a traditional look depending on the color. So, a couple points. If the site plan remains exactly as it's submitted, and the number of units, is still targeted at 120, that a 4-story building, is actually required on this footprint. It's just difficult on this footprint to get quality units, in a 3-story building. We'd actually lose 25% of the units. So the building really needs to be the size that it is, and technically, I think the height needs to be a few feet, taller than what's allowed. In order to reduce the residential component, you really have to expand this building and spread it out. And given some of the existing conditions that John described, that's a difficult task on this piece of property. And then I might point out that I think the regulation of fronting the street and having a certain size and scale makes tremendous sense. A lot of towns do that. We're doing 2 similar projects in Fairfield right now. But I think if you look at this building and where it's positioned, it actually kind of fronts 95. And I think as it fronts 95, I think its size and its scale does not, it does not overpower and is a little bit more consistent, with the 95 site or roadway, because it's actually set back off of East Main. So there are physical requirements to be able to put a building like this together, that many units, and it really needs to be the 4 stories. But again, we position it so that it fronts, and I think looks very prominent on 95, and I think it would be a great look. So, John, that's all I have.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Ray. Mr. Chairman, I know that Harry will provide his staff report. I just want to comment on a few things. He mentioned the self-storage building regulation, section 7.12, and the requirement of a minimum of 5,000 feet between self-storage facilities. We are more than 5,000 square feet. He mentioned lockup self-storage. We're a little bit more than a mile away as the crow flies, and about 1.2 miles if you measure it along the roadway. So we do comply with that. And then sort of like from a bigger picture, he mentions the use of a PDD, and I know you've seen a number of them recently, and trying to create village-like nodes. And certainly that's a wonderful aspiration, and we certainly don't besmirch anyway. I think there are village aspects to this, but not every site can lend itself to that, particularly where you have sort of the limitations and opportunities that this location has. The limitations are the ones that Mancini described in terms of wetlands, steep slopes, and this no build line, but also the opportunity to reuse an existing building that has tremendous value in and of itself, and use it in a way that requires no new construction, very environmentally friendly, doesn't create traffic issues, and is attractive on its own. And people are accustomed to seeing this building in its current location and format. So, I like these informal meetings because we can really hear from you. I think the PDD process is a valuable one. I have served on my own commission in my town for years. I'm not on it currently, but I was a fan of the PDD for a very long time, because it allows you to have these exchanges. And if you were and it gives you an opportunity to say to us, if you could change architecture in this way or that way, or could add landscaping, it allows you, greater input. And we understand that this is a legislative application. And so, we have an opportunity to respond to those sorts of requests, and maybe have, elevate certain components of the overall project. You're not going to hear us say, well, we comply with the regulations, you have to prove it. We see this as a collegial and cooperative effort to have these, some of these more difficult or challenging sites redeveloped in a way that the town can be part of.
Chuck Anderson, thank you, Mr. Nuff. Are you done at this time with your?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we're happy to engage in a dialogue with the commission, but we've given you a lot to digest, and would love to hear from you.
Great.
Mr. Chair, one other thing, the area that is wooded and non-paved from the existing theater parking lot over is already in a dedicated conservation easement.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's Harry, maybe you can give some of your comments, and then we can go around and give the applicant some reaction from first impressions, I guess. So Harry, do you have anything? Do you want to comment on your staff report at all?
Sure. Harry Smith, Town Planner. I guess I'll start by saying I listened very attentively to the presentation, and I took note, particularly of the comment that this proposed sort of set of uses is very consistent with what is present in the area, at least the immediate area of exit 55, sort of apart from the other PDD on the other side of the highway, which is, multi-family with some commercial component to the building fronting East Main Street. I appreciate the difficulties of the site, the quality of the existing building, the fact that's been used, it sounds like successfully in the past, and redeveloped for self-storage. I guess my basic question, I reviewed this through the context of looking at the requirements of zoning regulations for planned development district, and also looking at the plan of conservation development. So my main critique is not really what's proposed for development here. It's the vehicle being used to achieve approval, if you will. The planned development district, this is really more of a collection of sort of a loose collection of unrelated uses, frankly, in terms of what's proposed. They don't really speak to each other very well. So I think that if you look at the purpose of the planned development district, sort of applied in the title, it's planned development. This is basically trying to redevelop something that's there with a lot of constraints, and trying to look at economically viable uses that would contribute to the economy of the town. I appreciate all that. Another way to look at it, and I'll go into some of the detailed comments, but maybe PDD is not the right vehicle. Maybe looking at adding self-storage to BL would be an approach. And then you could have the two commercial development parts of this and look at another vehicle for the multifamily, which could be incentive housing zone, which was done by the Vigliottis successfully, and would also address the town's quest for more affordable housing. So it would be, of course, a higher required percent of affordable housing. So that's an alternative that I would suggest be looked at. It wasn't in my staff comments per se, but looking at what's proposed in the context of the regulations. First of all, I know it was alluded to by Attorney Nuff that this is a discretionary application. The commission's in no way obligated to look at a list of requirements, and if it feels it meets them, to approve it. This is a rezoning, and everything else falls out from there. The PDD regulations do direct the commission to consider the plan of conservation development, and these village-like nodes are something that's in the plan of conservation development, something that should be considered, and that's something that, frankly, on the other side of the highway, you've got sort of a village-like node of development with, internally consistent residential development with some internal amenities, pedestrian connections, a little bit of commercial development in the first building there. It sort of works together. And my comment really about considering the demolition of the cinema building and not knowing its viability per se, structurally, was to provide some flexibility on the site for a whole different layout. That would lend itself to something maybe more akin to the development on the other side of the highway. But given what's there, I really question whether this is something that meets the PDD regulations in terms of what they set out to encourage. I think the proposed use was already talked about in terms of self-storage, and it's 5,000 feet, and it is close. So I didn't, do anything other than get on a Google map and draw a line. It looked like it was a little bit under a mile, but could be over a mile. So the density right here that's proposed is about 10 dwelling units an acre. The IHC would allow more actual, depending on where the lot lines are proposed, which is another issue. If you're going to have 4 separate lots, how that really works with the PDD, it's not strictly prohibited. But if you're going to have 4 separate potential owners of the PDD, really with different objectives in terms of what the development is on their lots, how that practically works out might be pretty challenging to manage as the property owners and also regulate as the commission. So throw that out there too. Just a side comment. I did mention this in internal staff meeting with the fire department, and they expressed some desire to consult with the applicant. I don't know if that has taken place, particularly with respect to the 4-story residential building that's proposed. And they do not, the comment I received was, it was not clear they could use the highway ramp to access the rear part of the building. So how that would all work out, I think that should be best left to a discussion with the fire department. But I would note that just so that's out there. So as I said, I don't know if PDD is generally, a vehicle potential developers can go to if there's not another appropriate district that could accommodate the development. So I think it's possible that given some rezoning of the use, there are other existing regulations that could accommodate this development that really should be looked at. So I think I'll just leave it there. Since this is a conceptual discussion, see what everyone else has to say. Thank you.
Chuck Anderson, Chair. Thank you, Harry. Okay, who wants to start?
So I think I'll start.
Joe, go ahead.
Just looking at the site plan. Well, I think renovating the cinema is a good idea and converting it to something. Apartment building, the 4-story apartment building. To me, it'd be nice if they were going to be able to that many units, but building to me is one big building. I don't think is as attractive as if they had like maybe 2 buildings. Basically, what you just said, I was going to say that about the fire department. They get access to that. The biggest part of the building is in the back, and there's no way of getting back there. Fire trucks or something. You've got that whole wall of building. If this was to be built the way the print is being shown, it might be a real tough situation. Me, looking at it real quick, is getting one big building like that, and then looking at the parking. A lot of the parking, yes, you have some parking in the front, and you have some off to the left side closest to Route 1. And the rest of the parking, there's a big area to the right of the cinema. And that parking is going to be utilized mostly by the apartment people, not by the people that are using storage. And so you're basically putting the parking farthest away from the residents of that building. I think you got a big green plot area to the right, that building being used as lawn or grass or whatever, and get that parking should be closer to the building. But my opinion is that building should be split into at least two units, two different separate buildings, and spread it out and give it a little bit of, a little creativity instead of putting one big glob of a building 4 stories high. And mentioned that they need to go a little bit more to 4 stories to make it look a little more attractive. So, and I think I would like to see a few less units, but putting apartments there, that idea, especially if some of it is going to be affordable rent. A little bit more planning to make it a little bit more attractive and make the parking a little bit more easier for the residents of that apartment building.
Chuck and Chair. Thank you, Joe. Anything else?
No, that'll be all.
Chuck, Fred Russo.
Great. Okay, Fred, go ahead.
I like the idea of repurposing a building. I think in the society we live in today, the first thing that people want to do is rip things down. So to take that building, and I recall I went to several movies here over the years. I think that's a good idea. I actually like the idea they're going to be a coffee shop in the front there. There used to be, I think, a bank there at one time. Or I got the other property. I'm sorry, I got the wrong property. But I like the idea that little in the front, it softens it up. Now, I agree with Joe Bayuso. I think, I don't, in principle, have an objection of having kind of that mixed use kind of thing there on the property. But I think the building is big. And I think that if they could work on that a little bit better, I know, what developers go through and, square footage, and, does it make it worthwhile doing. But I'm like 2/3 in, and on the last third, probably 40%. So I wouldn't walk away from the project and say it's just a terrible idea, but I think that it definitely needs to be spruced up a little bit.
Chuck Caters. Thank you, Fred. Anyone else want to go? Have comments?
Sure, I'll try. Joe Chadwick speaking. It's funny because when I first looked at the plan, I had an awful lot of the sentiments that Harry expressed, but I did not have the vocabulary of the regulations, like sort of at my fingertips to actually say that. It is sort of an odd mix of stuff to agglomerate on a site. On one hand, when I looked at it, I thought, that's a clever thing to do with the old theater because it has such a miserable perimeter to depth ratio that you can't really use it for very much. There's not very much you can do with the restructuring of it. So maybe self-storage isn't a bad thing. At least you're saving the shell. You've got some economic advantage there. I am not bothered so much by, I actually sticking with this though. I just wonder to what length we're going to save the shell, since so much of buildings of this era were kind of built with salvage value in mind. There just is not that much sort of character or value associated with the building. And for as much stuff as you're going to strip off, you're basically saving steel and you're redoing the weather envelope, probably the roof. So you've got basic structure, which is probably 20% of the whole value of the building. So I wonder what you're getting by saving the theater building. But I'm sure people have gone through the numbers on that, and it makes sense enough for them to propose it. In looking at the apartments, my first thought from the renderings was, a 4-story building is pretty tall. But the relative placement of the 4-story building on that site is somewhat lower than the road and far enough back from the road that I don't feel bad about a 4-story building at all. I think enough of the typical gestures of scale were made in the design to mitigate any overwhelming sense of height. And I think, whether it's a single block of a building or it becomes several blocks in its development, I think a 4-story building makes a certain amount of sense on that site if the density is needed to acquire the residential component. The restaurant and food uses close to the road. Yeah, I wouldn't put the outside dining on the roadside. I mean, it's just that's not a very gracious road. But you sort of want to flip that around and have that more internal to the site. But other than that, it's it's definitely a start of something. I'm fully accepting the height of the building. I think it's great. We've got some affordable housing for a change as part of the the walk-in deal. And like I said, the self-storage, I can't personally, I can't believe we need another self-storage facility in Branford. And the effort to achieve it has me scratching my head. But like I said, somebody's probably gone through the market study and believes this is a thing. So I'll wait to see how that pans out. That's my comments.
Hey, Chuck, can it's John Mancini. Can I just address something Joe said? Because I just want to make sure, Joe, the patios are inward, Mr. Chadwick. They are.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. It's kind of the scale of the drawing, but our patios are in this front area. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. So and then
thank you.
Yep. And then in terms of the building itself, so just to be clear, the building is structurally well built. There's not an issue with the building, but when you do storage inside these buildings, we've done them successfully. What happens, Joe, is the storage units themselves. I don't know how to say this, but they kind of hold themselves up. So you're actually building storage like inside the walls of this building. So the storage isn't leaning or relying on the exterior walls. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. So
I get that, but it's...
yeah. So, we're not going to have to change the roof. We're not going to have to change the mechanicals. We're not going to have to do anything like that. It's just, as you know, the theater building, we've all been in it. It's got no windows. It's a very difficult thing to redevelop for other things than that type of use, because if you started cutting windows in there and trying to make 2 stories of some other use, say office or something, now you're Swiss cheesing those walls. And now you're getting to the point where it doesn't even make sense to keep the building because it's not set up for that use. So I just wanted to make sure, and a market study was done by CubeSmart, and they look at all the other facilities around, and then they look at existing and proposed residential dwellings. And that's how they determine whether or not and believe me, they turned down more sites than they approved. So we did do that market study.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. Sharon and Massimo, have any thoughts, comments?
Sure. Massimo here. How you doing? Yeah, no, I mean, I think this project, I mean, I looked at it, it's a pretty creative project. I like that. There's a lot of positives, and, I think when there's positives, as a commission, we could possibly, do what needs to be done to rezone and, participate in making this project work. And aesthetically, I think it's a good thing. And also, traffic wise, I also think it's placed in a perfect place. Those are the positives, I loved what Joe said earlier about, possibly, making 2 buildings and keeping them 3 levels, My only negative about the whole project is the safety of the people, just in case there's a fire. I think that has to be hammered out. And sometimes, I'm concerned about sometimes, kind of breaking the rules and going, and changing the height requirements in the town. And if that could, I love the look of the building. It's just that I think it opens up a can of worms sometimes for other projects, that are going to be possibly coming our way. And those would be the only negatives, are the safety and the height. I love what Joe said about maybe if you could make 2 buildings and have easier access for the fire, for the fire department, just in case of an emergency. I think, maybe you could even have more apartments doing it that way and keeping it lower by building 2 buildings. But I know this is just the beginning, and you guys will probably be making some adjustments here, but that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Massimo.
You're welcome.
Sharon, do you have any thoughts?
I think that that we certainly need more affordable apartments in Branford, but I get the sense that this was just cobbled together, and I feel like the PDD kind of concept is being stretched here, and the POCD says that we should be looking more for a village kind of atmosphere and structures as on the other side of exit 55. So I would like the developers to rethink in terms of that.
Dr. Andrews, thank you, Sharon.
Hey, Chuck, can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just,
sure.
Yeah, I want to just reply to Sharon. Guys, like we have to face it, reality. A year ago, remember what the other side of the highway looked like, and now tomorrow drive out here and look at how nice this site is and how well it was kept. There was nothing on the other site. It was blight. There was nothing that could be salvaged on that site. It was an entirely dilapidated hotel that no one would ever go to for years. And it was an entirely rundown restaurant that was closed for years. So the idea of starting over there and saving the front building that has the nice, longtime family Chinese restaurant in it, and other businesses that have been there, as well, is like us saving and holding on to the Walgreens. And we just described why the storage facility really needs to be, the theater building really needs to be adaptive reuse. And that site doesn't have the wetlands that this site has, and it doesn't have the restricted no build structure line. So there's a distinct difference between this side and that side. They're just not the same. I've lived in this town a very long time, and I know what that site looked like, and what MetroStar has done is awesome. I'm happy to be, I'm proud of that project there, but it's not the same existing conditions situation that we have here.
Chuck Andrews. Thank you, Mr. Mancini. I'll give you my sort of miscellaneous comments, I guess, in 4 categories. I guess the real first question I had was, gee, there's a lot on the site. And that was probably, based on what, we're conditioned by what's there now. And what was there now is a Walgreens and a large building that was a cinema. And I understand there was a history before that where there are other buildings. And now you're taking those, essentially those 2 buildings are staying, and you're adding 120 units of apartments and a restaurant and a coffee shop, which are additional uses on the same site. So it just seemed, wow, that's a lot. So I don't know what the floor area ratio ends up being or whatever, but that was, that's that was just kind of initial reaction. Then on the residential side, it is dense. I think it's 120 units. That lot, it was what, 4 acres. It comes out to be, you did the just a density, not the net, but the it's like 21 units per acre, 21 plus units per acre on that lot, assuming that's going to be a 5.67 acre lot. So that's a lot. That's higher, obviously, than what our multifamily allows. It's higher than what the incentive housing allows. You know, so it is dense, and then that includes all the greens. So what that means is a couple things. To me, that's one more reason for, if you do this at all, that you need more affordable. And I know you've offered 10%, and this is one of my continuing themes, but it looks like a dense 120 units, 21 per acre. It exceeds the height. And I think that's, you know, actually Massimo, I thought made a good point, is that once you go over something, someone else is always going to say, but you did it for them, but you did it for them. There is, even if you say, oh, it's different or whatever, you do establish precedent. That is an issue. But so what? You know, if you went over that to me, this looks like a single block building with a lot of there's no clubhouse or whatever. This is the one where you should have a lot more affordable. So anyway, I would want more than 10% affordable on this, you know, in any event. And I do have some concern just about the height and everything else of it as well. And you heard from Joe Viozo, could you break it up in 2 buildings? And I understood what you said no, because we're restricted. We can only build in certain areas and so forth. So, you know, to me, you know, it would be more feasible if they were a lot more affordable. So from that side. The self-storage stuff, I mean, the plus, obviously, an adaptive reuse, that's creative. We have a whole self-storage section in our regulations. I mean, I think the lot size would be minimum 5 acres. And again, this is going to be, it's not going to be a 5 acre lot. I mean, what I have some concern is whether this use would be violating the spirit of 7112, if not the letter. I don't even know, because there's other bulk requirements in there about self-storage in addition to separation distances, which again end up being an exception, and you'll have someone throw it at you. But I don't know. That's a concern. Does PDD get you out of that? Just, oh, it's PDD, so I don't have to comply with the minimum acreage or anything else. Or I don't know. That was an issue that came to my mind. And then the final issue was sort of the general issue that Harry said, and I think he's accurate, that it's not particularly a cohesive PDD. It's you're going to divide it into 4 lots. I assume you're going to sell it out, probably individual lot owners. They're not going to operate as a unit. It's not going to be particularly cohesive. I mean, it's not that they're connected to one another. So, I mean, that is what it is. And is that the proper use of the PDD? I mean, Harry was suggesting, could you do it by rezoning parts of it different ways without doing that? So, I mean, that's a fair comment too. So anyway, you asked for impressions. Those are mine. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we do appreciate all the thoughts, both positive and negative, and gives us, you know, some things to think about, you know, and I know that we're approaching time clock, and, you know, you devote a lot of time to these meetings, and we all appreciate that. But if you can bear with me for a few minutes, I think it's worth continuing the conversation with all of you, because I think we do have enough to, you know, maybe go back and make some modifications. But, you know, I think we're feeling as if we can be submitting an application in the fairly near future. In terms of the, you know, and I'll address these as they sort of come to mind. In terms of the building height, you know, this is not something that we would be asking you to do. It was my anticipation that, you know, we would be seeking a variance for the multifamily residential height, because I think we have a very good case for it. You know, hardships are not easy to prove. I think we can prove one here. And so there would be no concern on behalf of the Planning and Zoning Commission that you're setting a precedent. And I understand that, land use practitioners, attorneys, engineers, members of the public talk about precedent. This is a legislative act. And so, you'll never hear me say that. I never use those words in studying precedent because I know it's not the case. And I know that this commission will hold firm on those things, but I don't think you need to worry about the height issue because, we would be seeking a variance. I think there'd be a strong basis for doing so. In terms of Harry's comment, in terms of making a modification to the BL regulations to allow self-storage, I mean, candidly, that opens up the kind of worms of where else could you do this? I mean, could we draft a regulation to amend the BL regulations to say on a site greater than 10.7 acres, but less than whatever, it's like, that's the beauty of a PDD, frankly. You don't have to, your regulations are very modest, straightforward in terms of the size. Towns that don't have PDDs, Stanford, Westport, those places, they have the proverbial Manhattan phone book of regulations, because that's what they do. They essentially create PDDs for every new site, but they're not intellectually honest enough to call them a PDD. They just amend their regulations time and time and time again. That's the beauty of a PDD, is that you can do these types of uses, when you have these unusual sites, and you don't have to worry about some unintended consequences coming down the road. John mentioned that this is vastly different than the MetroStar property. We are nearly identical in terms of floor area ratio. I think we're pretty similar in terms of total density. In terms of how this could operate as a whole, this takes place all the time, and it's invisible to commissions, it's invisible to staff, because there would be a declaration of easements, reciprocal easements that would run to and from each of the property owners. And so there would be no issue with regard to that this could operate cleanly. I understand that there's been a couple of comments that this is an unusual grouping of uses on one property. Well, what if they weren't all one property? The uses that you're seeing here are the uses in the neighborhood. Frankly, in some ways, nicer than some of the uses in the neighborhood. It just happens that this happens to be one parcel that's a little bit larger than other uses. But these are uses you would see in the nearby vicinity all the time. You have residential right down the streets. You have coffee shops, you have restaurants. We don't have any automotive uses. We don't have a car wash. We don't have car repair. We have very attractive upscale buildings, and ones that the people who would be living in the multifamily building would like to utilize. I think we could talk about where the parking is located with regard to Joe Vayusa's comments. I think we're trying to be as respectful of the wetlands as we possibly can. I think Mr. Bigliotti is comfortable with where the parking is located.
John, this is Ray. Can I address the fire issue for a second?
Yeah, please.
So Ray Sullivan, Sullivan Architectural Group. We are compliant with fire department access. There is no regulation that a fire truck drive all the way around the building because we've got buildings of odd shapes and sizes, near property lines. What there is a regulation that if a fire truck, in this case, pulled up on the left side of the building and on the right side of the building, there's a hose pull requirement. So you can't exceed a hose pull of 450 feet. And that's from either side. So we're significantly underneath that. So we are safe. We're completely fire rated. We're completely fire suppressed per NFPA 13, which is the better system. And so we are compliant. Having said that, questions like this always come up, and we would clearly sit down with the fire marshal and make sure he is comfortable. But a number of people have said that, I'm concerned about the safety. This building is safe and it is compliant. That's all, John.
Okay, thanks, Ray. So I think we've addressed everything, with perhaps, our longstanding respectful disagreement on the percentage of affordable. I know that 10% is what you typically ask. I mean, the project on the other side of the highway was at 5%. We're doubling that percentage, but there is a ramification to all that. So, and I don't expect you to respond to my response.
John, aren't you the one that just said you don't cite precedent? And there you just go. Okay.
Fair enough.
John,
Fair enough.
there you go. So I you just lost credibility there. You should know better.
I'm providing context.
Okay. Yeah. That's okay. I'll remember that.
Touche. Thank you.
Yep.
No, so those are our thoughts. I mean, obviously the team has given this, considerable thought. We do appreciate, all the comments, and I'm glad that a number of them were positive, and I'm glad and appreciative of the fact that you all can understand the challenges and opportunities on this site. I think the Wetland Commission will be very glad to see what it is that we're doing. I think the ZBA will be happy with what we're doing. And I think, as you travel up and down East Main Street on your way to the industrial zone, people will appreciate, the attractive nature of the buildings that we're adding and sprucing up the existing cinema. So if anyone wants to respond again, I know I exceeded my self-imposed 5-minute limit, but again, I appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Harry.
Just one quick comment, Harry Smith, Town Planner. Given the continual evolution of retail, commercial along the Route 1 corridor, and we've got some vacancies already, and things will continue to evolve, of course. And, apart from this, it might be something worthwhile for the commission to consider adding self-storage to the BL zone, recognizing you've got the 5,000 square foot separation, so you're certainly not going to get several of them in a row. So I think, there may be some unintended consequences. Would never say rule that out completely, but I think the separation distances would really serve as a pretty substantial break on any additional self-storage facilities, just because of the way they're spaced out currently, whether in the BL or just in the IZ. I mean, if they're BL and the IG zones, I don't think you're going to get a lot more anyway, because I don't think you possibly could. In comply, if you want to maintain compliance with that 5,000 foot separation distance, which brings again the possibility of this becoming, at least on the residential side, an incentive housing zone development. So, but I already said everything, so enough said. I don't want to repeat myself. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else have any further comments? If not, then thank you, Mr. Nuff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I hope you and Harry and Evan all have a wonderful rest of the summer and enjoy your well-deserved month off.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. So we have a number of bond releases also on our agenda. So
let me just go through them. We have 471 East Main Street, which is a bond release for a landscaping bond. This is the Blue Point Wellness or RISE, the recreational marijuana, medical marijuana establishment. So the memorandum from the zoning enforcement officer, Jane Ellis. She's recommending the return of the bond in the amount of $12,000. All landscaping is completed and has survived the winter.
Okay. Someone make a motion to release the bond for 471 East Main per the recommendation of the zoning enforcement officer.
Fred Roche makes that recommendation.
Okay. Fred makes the motion to authorize the release of the bond. Is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second by Joe Chadwick. Further discussion? All those in favor? Joe Chadwick.
Chadwick is in favor.
Greg Russo.
Fred Russo in favor.
Joe Vayuzo.
In favor.
Sharon Hutner.
Sharon Hutner is in favor.
Chair is also in favor. What's the next one here?
The next one is 168 Montaouise. This is the site of the new Dar Bar. There was a bond outstanding of $500 for lighting for the sign. We have another memo from the zoning enforcement officer saying she's inspected the property. In response to request for return on the lighting bond, she recommends return of the bond in the amount of $500 as the lighting has been completed to the satisfaction of town staff.
Great. Okay, someone make a motion to return the bond for the Darbar Restaurant for its lighting bond at 168 Monterey Street.
So moved.
Motion made by Joe. Is there a second?
Fred Russo seconds.
Second by Fred. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe Chadwick.
Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo.
Fred Russo in favor.
Joe Vayuza.
In favor.
Sharon Hutner.
Sharon Hutner is in favor.
And Chair is also in favor. Next one, Harry.
The next and last one is to establish a bond at 28 Park Place for grading and driveway paving. Recommendation in a memo from Jane Ellis, zoning enforcement officer, for a bond in the amount of $6,000 for the driveway grading and paving.
Okay. Someone make a motion to establish a bond for 28 Park Place for the driveway grading and paving in the amount of $6,000.
Chadwick makes
the motion.
Give the motion to Joe Chadwick. Who's
I'll second it. Fred Russo
seconds. Fred. Any further discussion? All in favor, Joe Chadwick.
Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo.
Fred Russo in favor.
Joe Vayuza.
Favor.
Sharon.
Sharon Hutner is in favor.
And Chair's also in favor. So we've established that bond. What's next for planners report, Harry?
Given the hour, I really don't have a lot else to offer. So our next meeting would be on the 20th of July. We will, in our legal notice and everything for the September meeting, keep it without any additional change or direction from the commission as a Zoom meeting, and just proceed on until you tell us otherwise.
Okay. So, and unfortunately for the July 20th meeting, clients making me go to another part of the state, so I will not be able to do it. But so Fred, you'll be chairing now.
Chuck, I'm going to get a membership in the gym to work out so that when that meeting comes, I'm going to be really ready.
All right. There we go.
I'm good. I'm good with it.
Excellent. Great. Anything else from anyone?
I don't have anything. Evan, you have anything?
Nope.
Okay. Anyone else? No one else from commission members? Then someone want to make a motion to adjourn.
Fred Russo, motion to adjourn.
Motion by Fred. Is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second by Joe Chadwick. All in favor of the motion to adjourn. Joe Chadwick.
Chadwick in favor.
Fred Russo.
Fred Russo in favor.
Joe Vayuza.
Favor.
Sharon.
Sharon Hutner is in favor, and
Chair's
have a
also.
good summer, everybody.
Chair is also in favor. So thank you, everyone. So,
Hey, good night,
This program
everybody.
was brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.